Well, good morning, Dan. How's it going for you?
Good
You're in
morning.
Susanville.
That's correct, Rob. Good morning to you. Things are good up here. Oddly enough, we're organizing and sending folks down south right now, trying to get some things together here. So,
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to be sending a crew down there. Susanville, I saw, is in northeastern California, about 17,000 people. High too, it's like 4,500 feet.
yep, absolutely. We sit there, the Mile High Club, if you will, in northeast corner, California. We kind of call it the other side of the state, if you will. You get on the east side of the crest, and let's just say the demographics change, those kind of things. So it's real calm, real quiet this time of year. That's my point with that.
High desert there.
Yep, it's a
Pretty
unique
dry.
geographic area, really. The Southern Cascades meet the Northern Sierras, and all that meets the Great Basin right here in Susanville.
Awesome. So I'm doing a little bit reading about the Diamond Mountain Hotshot Crew, and if I understand correctly, you guys were one of the original crews. Hotshot Crew started BLM like in '75, and now in just like this year, you were moved over to the Park Service. Is that right?
Nope, none of that's correct, actually.
Oh,
We were we
AI's got that wrong.
yeah,
Go ahead.
absolutely. We were founded in 1992
Okay.
here in Susanville, California by Mikey Bowles. Kurt LaRue took over in '93, and then you know sorry, backtrack here a little bit. Yeah, we started in '92, but really became kind of who we are in '93, and that's a story about transition, I'd say, from a crew that was struggling, and then bringing in a really strong superintendent from Southern California, came in here and brought the true, what I would say, hotshot mentality to Diamond Mountain, and a culture that we hold near and dear to our heart as far as a blue collar work ethic. So we still remain with the BLM. We're one of 13 BLM interagency hotshot crews in the nation, and one of two in California.
What does interagency mean? Does it mean you can be tasked to any fire anywhere, or what does it mean?
Yeah. So while we're hosted by the BLM, the other agencies are what we would call cooperators, and we support nationally. We support our cooperators nationally. So we are what we call a national resource. And if you to kind of brush through a little bit, the National Geographic Coordination Center will reach out to the geographic area coordination centers and prioritize what their needs are per each GAC, our geographic area coordination center, and we support large fire incidents or potential for large fire incidents anywhere in the nation.
How far have you been deployed from Susanville for a fire?
Myself personally, I definitely am one of those folks that runs what I call peak fire season. But we've traveled as far as Diamond Mountain as an interagency hotshot crew, and there's a little bit of a story to that too about our availability time periods and how we manage that. So what we call our season versus fire year, which is the term kind of getting thrown around a lot now, which makes sense. You got fires going on in January right now. But
Right.
anyways, we've taken the crew, as far as the Dakotas, really within my time frame here. I would have to dig into the archives a little bit to see specifically how far maybe Kurt or any of the former superintendents had taken the crew.
And your season is March to October. When does it run? Or when do you have your seasonal guys report?
So we typically bring our seasonal or known as temporary employees on beginning of May. There's
Okay.
some budgetary constraints and/or just hiring constraints that can affect that start date. But ultimately, we generally start beginning of May. We go into what we call our critical 80, our 80 hours of critical training, which is a requirement for the standards of interagency hotshot crew operations, known as the SITCO. It's kind of our guiding document for standards nationally for all Type 1 interagency hotshot crews. So we need to be together for 80 hours to build that cohesive unit, and that's kind of a requirement in the SITCO. And then after that 80 hours, my job as a superintendent is decide, are we ready? Can we go deliver a Type 1 product? Not only just a Type 1 product, can we deliver a Diamond Mountain product?
Just in terms of
Quality.
expertise and everything.
Yeah, all of the above. Can we provide the leadership that's required on an incident? That's one of our big tasks as an interagency hotshot crew with our standards and qualifications is we can provide leadership within a large fire incident as well as developing strategy and then implementing tactics.
Wow, interesting. And just so we kind of I understand the organization, 20 to 25 people when you're fully staffed. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's the national standard. There's some other things going on with other agencies as far as trying to determine if they can increase that number to kind of increase staffing to outside of peak fire season, and that's a pretty big rabbit hole. But anywho, for us, yeah, that May to really October, maybe beginning of November, we're looking to staff at a minimum of 18 people. That's a requirement nationally. We have to maintain 18 individuals. And then within the BLM, we can staff up to 25 individuals. So not past that. And that's more of a, for my lack of full understanding of why that number 25 is there, I would say it's more of a logistical and budgetary.
So let me just make sure I understand the breakdown at your unit. You are the superintendent, and then you have two assistants. Is that right?
Yep. Our table of organization supports one superintendent and two assistant superintendents, also known as captains.
Right.
And then 3 squad leaders, and then 3 leads or seniors. And then we can have the autonomy within each crew to decide if we need more permanent employees or career seasonal employees. The superintendent and the 2 captains, on my crew at least, are the only ones that work year round.
Okay.
Everybody else is career seasonal. While we find funding and ways to keep them employed in the winter, we typically have a real down staff period, kind of really beginning of December through January. And just with our location, we don't anticipate large fires or the need to support large fires. And we can't plan that financially. You never know when the anomaly fire is going to happen. And it's hard to plan that budgetarily. And being a federal agency, we have to be aware of our funding.
What does career seasonal mean?
So you have a breakdown, and the simplest way to say this is that it breaks down to 26 pay periods in a year, bi-weekly pay periods. So every 2 weeks, you call that a pay period. You get 26 of those. When we say career seasonal, we're saying 13 pay periods, you're guaranteed work. Past that, we can take you up to 25 pay periods, but you have to furlough or lay off for 1 pay period because you're not a permanent full-time employee. We have to show a furlough, which for a lot of our younger folks, the culture of wildland fire in general, and then in particular hot shotting, we have folks that want to travel. We have a lot of folks that enjoy winter sports, those kind of things. It's why some folks say it's a young person's game, if you will, because they can kind of play both sides of the world a little bit. Come fight some fire in the summer and then maybe ski in the winter type of deal. So it supports that lifestyle. Pros and cons to that. But anywho, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I kind of understood that. And what is, I guess, in terms of your turnover each season, where you get new people on, I guess, so there's 3 of you who are permanent, and then your career seasonal, those are probably your squad leaders and your lead fire guys on the each squad. Am I correct?
Yep,
and
absolutely.
Then you probably have a handful of other careers who come in there to fill in the gaps. But what kind of turnover are you looking at each year, just in new people coming in?
It depends. We're unique in our area. These more what we would call remote locations. While we're not by any means the most remote location, we don't have the attractive accommodations to bring people in and maybe necessarily want to stay. I think some folks miss the boat on what's actually available here when you're a recreationalist. With whether it's hunting or skiing, there's a ton to do here. So what we failed over the years to do is really recruit that and say, hey, this area hosts these things. And it's also affordable considering it's California. But anyways, our turnover rate, typically we're running, I'd say, at an attrition of almost 50%. If you take all the positions together, I'm the anomaly, if you will. I've been on this crew for 17 years. So, and my captains have both moved on to take on new jobs and
Oh,
move up the
really?
chain. Yep. So, and that's okay, man. That's a good thing. From my perspective, the attrition that we're experiencing, and I can only speak to me, right, and this crew on that, is that we're not having an attrition because folks are trying to, they're unhappy per se with the leadership and the culture of the crew. It's that
Right.
we're developing them and we're teaching them that, hey, you have a skill set and you should use it. And while I would like them to stay here and work with me, at the same time, they have desires and aspirations that it's my job to support and make sure that they're moving up. And we can get really focused on status as a hotshot crew, and that name means a lot to us. That the hotshot name means a ton, but at the end of the day, it's about developing people. And while we might have this turnover, we're starting to see a culture shift and also an increase in applications or candidates for positions. It's just, we're talking about hiring people when they're about 20 to 22 years old.
Right.
They spend about 4 years with us, and then they're from places like Michigan, man. They're from Maryland. They want to go home. They
Got it.
come here, they get developed, and they want to go home. And boy, I can't argue that. I'm just lucky that where I live, I have the things that I need and want and desire. I have my family here. I have everything I want to do here. But this is also where I'm from. So, so that's the thing. So our local recruitment should increase, and we're working on that. We're trying to figure out how do we bring our locals in.
So just people there in or close by to Susanville is what you're thinking. So you don't have
Yeah,
to housing. What is the? Can you go right to a hotshot crew, or do you need to spend time on the truck crew first?
depends. So we have in that sicko, that document I've been kind of talking about here.
Yeah.
There is a requirement that 80% of our personnel, in order to meet status, have 1 year prior wildland fire experience. So
Okay.
we can have 4 inexperienced people. And I'm okay with inexperience. I'm okay with that because I believe in my leadership and I believe in their capabilities to coach and teach them and deliver our culture, traditions, and our standards. And so I think we're a little unique, and we have to. The experienced folks that have 5, 6 years, they're leaving other crews and going to other agencies, not to come to us to be within the same agency. They're going to these other agencies, maybe state agencies or metro departments, and moving their career in that direction. But point is here is we we're really focused on development. So it's starting to catch a hold, and I think we can develop. It's easy, not necessarily easier. I don't want to sound wrong here or say this wrong. It's it's okay to have inexperience. It's okay to not be a part of this job and not know what's going on. If we encourage that, in fact, and say, hey, 'cause most of the time when you're talking to these folks, they're like, oh, I need a challenge. And this, because they have no experience, doesn't mean that they're 18. Some of these folks that have no experience are 35. They're coming out of the military. They're coming out of these other branches of life, and they have something that even some of my experienced folks, my 2 or 3 year folks, don't have. They have life experience, and that's, I don't know how you teach life experience. It just kind of happens, but that's something to think about when we're looking at a resume and we're like, hey, yeah, you don't have experience, but like, what have you been doing? Where you been? Like, and then we can kind of narrow it down from there and say, oh, like, all right, like, you were in the Marines, awesome. Like, you know what it is to be a grunt. Come on in, let's do this.
Got it.
So
What is the you have your 80 hours at the beginning of the season. I assume there's some attrition there. I know there's a certain physical element to that. We'll get into that. What kind of attrition are you seeing? I mean, do you purposely bring more people in than you know you're going to be? You expect attrition?
yeah, so and it's ideally, right, like we talked about, 18 to 25 people can be on the crew,
Right.
right? So I try at best I can to bring 25 in on day one. On day one, I'd like to see 25 people sitting here And when you have higher numbers, and when you have 25, you can take the blow, because some folks, they don't hear the message that maybe the leadership and myself are passing to them about, hey, this likely may be the hardest thing you've ever done. Our first 2 weeks, and people have done hard things in their life and come here and said, I've never done anything like this. Had a guy last year, played D1 football, and he came in and said, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And it was like, okay, like that is real. And it's like, hey, so we try to pass that message to folks, but some folks, it just doesn't resonate with them, that what we're saying is like, hey, this is really going to test you. And it's not for everybody. So we really encourage success. So we're trying to make sure that these folks are educated about what they're getting into. They have access to us, all the leadership. They have full access to me. The 5 months prior to the season, my phone is with me. They're supposed to call me if they have questions, those kind of things. The ones that don't, those are the ones that we kind of find out if they have the discipline and the commitment to actually be a part of our organization. And some folks are just kind of looking for something new, and they get in and they're like, hey man, this wasn't what I thought it would be, and it's not really for me. And we'll do our best to figure out. I'd say 95% of the people that have been in that boat, there's a few outliers, but they're good people. They just didn't know what they were doing and getting into, and we'll support them, and we kind of find a way to navigate them towards a truck or an engine or a fuels crew or just a different resource that maybe they can go get their feet wet. So that's the only issue we have with hiring inexperienced people, is it's hard to get people to understand the message. And we're every year we're working on, how do we convey this? How do we sell this message to them, that here it is, this is what's going to be required of you. And we need you to understand that you have to put in the time and effort months before you show up.
I would assume that when you get applications from people coming from other hotshot crews or from truck crews, they probably have less attrition. They understand better what they're getting into.
Generally, yeah, I'd say, I've never actually tracked the data. I guess it would be interesting to see, but I can think of two cases where folks have come over from different resources and they struggled with us, and that I don't necessarily blame that individual. I blame the leadership that they had before to not properly prepare them for what other resources are capable of. Like any agency or any department or any branch of military, anything, you can have bad leaders that aren't developing their people, and those people move on thinking they have an understanding of what is needed of them, and then they show up to a highly disciplined crew and they're like, whoa, this is different. This is not what I thought it was, and I don't know that I actually like this. So or they got tainted, their attitudes are already gone, and it's just unfortunate. You see bad leadership and what it does to people.
So when you talk about people coming in and being prepared the 5 months before they get there, because I saw you're advertising for people now,
Yep.
You're talking primarily about physical preparation.
Yep. So we hit it on a couple levels, really. We really stress, so I've been in what I would call the transition years for Wildland Fire. I started in 2003 on a contract engine. And then I worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs on an on-call crew out of Carson City, Nevada. And then I was lucky enough to get moved over to a hotshot crew in Elko, Nevada. And through those transitions, I was able to see multiple layers and levels of leadership and realize that each one led me to Diamond Mountain via leadership, right? And this culture change that's happened from the best way I can explain it is the shut up and dig attitude. And we're transitioning into a true development stage. We have to. The
So
attrition rate.
the prior tradition was shut up and dig, and this is different. What you're talking about. Go ahead.
Yep. So we've transitioned from that kind of let's just say, I think one of the ways I could relay this is, when I was trying to get on a hotshot crew, it took me 3 years to get on a hotshot crew, applying
Right.
every year.
Oh, applying.
Applying because there wasn't the attrition rates that we're talking about these days. The opportunity to go to these crews, the open seats weren't there. People were staying on those crews longer. When I showed up to Diamond Mountain 4 or 5 years into my career, there was people that were temporary employees that had been temporary employees running chainsaws for 10 years. And it's now we're like, hey, even getting somebody to 10 years in a career, it's taken a lot of effort, and particularly on a hotshot crew. So just with what's demanded of us and the work that's required and the travel, most importantly, it's hard to have a family, right? For some of these folks. And that's a big deal to people, and it should be. But anywho, we're watching this transition happen to where we are now, and I believe it's positive. I believe it's a good thing. We're really starting to put our emphasis back into the development of the people, which I think will help to kind of slow down the attrition over time. It's about delivery, right? How you deliver these messages, how you deliver leadership, how you show the employee you appreciate them. And that's been the change.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if that stuff wasn't happening before and there was less attrition, and now it is happening, it would seem like there would be more attrition before than there is
Yeah.
now. So what's
Well,
changed?
the big hot ticket right now is pay reform, right?
More money, right?
Yep. So pay reform, it matters. When you stay at a flat budget, but the cost of living goes up,
Right.
the gap builds. That's the difference. Is the gap has built so much over 30 years from when these budgets were kind of originated, and there's been changes to those budgets. I wouldn't be able to give you details specifically, like, hey, in 2005 the budget increased to this or this percentage. That's
Right.
not my wheelhouse. But point is that we haven't seen the budgetary increase match the rate of inflation, for lack of better, my own lack of ignorance or my own ignorance into that situation and understanding. I can see the effects of what's happening. I can see what's happening to my folks saying, "Hey, man, I'm gonna go Metro because I'm home more. I can work a 72-hour shift, and I'm gonna take 4 days off afterwards, and I'm gonna make the same money." And it's like, yeah, totally get it, dude. Like, it's a little more stable, and there's, anyways, I think you understand what I'm saying there. But that's just my own anecdotal evidence of just saying, hey, back then you could come to anywhere in the United States and say 30 years ago, and it was a better paying job. And so people were maybe a little more willing to accept what some of these culture issues were, in my opinion. They were a little more willing to accept that because, you know what, they paid the bills at home, and it was a short-term thing. Wildland Fire has always been founded on temporary employees.
Right.
It's always been about seasonal employees and not a long-term plan into the future, which we're getting better at. There's a lot of people working really hard. I want to be clear about that, to organize and set the successional plan up so that we support our employees through a true career in Wildland Fire. Those pieces are all kind of coming together. But it's been 30 years in the making, and these seats were filled because they were like, you know what, I got to do this for 5 months, and then I'm going to lay off, and I'm going to make enough money in those 5 months to support me through the winter, and I'm going to be okay with that because I'm going to get a 7-month break from so-and-so, and then I'm okay, I can deal with them again for 5 months. Where now we're trying to figure out, how do we keep you on and around, and you are around these individuals more, so you're willing to put up with less of their attitudes and their lack of leadership or their lack of discipline, or whatever category you'd like to put up. And that's just my opinion, man. That's just my opinion and my observation.
So go back to when you started 17 years ago. How much money would you make? Because you started out seasonal, I assume. How much money
Yep.
would you make in the summer
So I
with a
started
busy
in
season?
2000. Yeah. So the way I started was on call. It's 17 years here with Diamond, and then there was 3 years prior to that before Diamond, or 4
Got it.
years, sorry, prior to that with Diamond. It was on call, and it basically, at the beginning of my career, I kept my phone with me, and they called when they needed me, and if I wasn't getting that call, I went to a temporary employment agency, and I worked in factories in Reno, Nevada, and just on that call. So that's how I filled the gap, right? And then when I got the fire call, which wasn't very great to the temporary hiring agency, but I just pretty much be like, I'm going on a fire. That's what I want to do. This is what I want to be, you know? So, but anyways, that stuff wasn't making a ton of when I got to Ruby Mountain and Elko, Nevada. That's when we started to see that I was probably pulling as a first year GS3 employee. Oh man, I probably barely scraped 40,000 at best. I'd have to go back and look, but yeah, it's about
that's just with overtime and stuff, and
yeah, that was everything
in the fire season, right?
Yep. So, and we ran a what I call a peak fire season time frame then too, which was May to October, really the fiscal year. If you're familiar with the federal agency's fiscal year, of kind of starts at October 1st. So a lot of us would lay off before the fiscal year, so that we could our supervisors at the time could manage their budget. So if we didn't want to spend next year's funding on this year's fire season, if that makes sense.
Right. When you talk about one of the interesting, I remember speaking to a somebody at the national, I think it's the might be the Park Service, but the one of the national organizations that handles fire, and I had contacted them. I was doing some research on wildland fire, fighter fatalities, and it struck me that in urban, fire fatalities is one or two or three, but it seems in wildland it's like guys, hotshot crews and others, they get killed by the dozen. I mean, when something happens, it's a lot. Yarnell is the most recent example of that, and I think there were 19 or 17, killed there.
19.
And it I guess it impacted me on how dangerous that job was and how big part of fitness is to it. So when you talk about the culture, and is that what driving the part of the culture is the danger of the job, but also obviously the performance and stopping the fire. But talk about the danger, and if that's something that you guys discuss or talk about a lot.
Yeah, there's nothing safe about this job. And when folks say this is the safest way to do it, my rebuttal always is, there's nothing safe about it. There's only risk management. And our ability to make decisions under stress is where fitness comes from. And my culture and tradition that I hope to drive here with my crew is that we don't PT to see your numbers. We PTs to see how you make decisions under stress. Because we need you when you're fatigued, it's late August, you're pushing your fourth or fifth roll, you are away from your family.
When you say roll, that's the fire you're working.
Yep. So right. 14, so back up, sorry, I should have said that. 14 days as a normal fire assignment, right? So put a day of travel on either end. Typically you're gone 16 days. For us, if we traveled out to Wyoming or something, that's about 2 days of travel. So you're talking 18 days away from home. You're talking about a few thousand miles of driving, and then you go and you get after it, and in some good topography, right? So you take all those things, and you have to understand that there's a responsibility, especially at leadership level, all the way down the chain. My big emphasis is everybody's a decision maker. That root you're about to cut is a decision. That tree you're about to cut is a decision. The organization of your people is a decision. The tactics and strategies up to my level, hopefully you see that path I'm kind of creating here is up to mine is, hey, I'm going to help influence strategy and then let my folks develop tactics that are going to be used. And I'm going to support their tactics decisions as long as it's lined up with the strategy into the division group supervisor and the superintendent. That's my biggest job. My biggest job is to coordinate with the leadership on a division and the other resources to make sure that we develop a team, right? So all of that stuff, that's the complications of fire. The tactics are simple. You pick this stick up and you move it over here. The tactics are simple. You put the water on the fire. It's the strategy and the development of the strategy and the communication with the adjoining resources that is the skill set that comes easier, in my opinion, to folks that have an ability to push themselves and have a fitness level that handles the fatigue that's required in the job, so that we can make, all that comes back down to decisions made under stress. If we
Hang on just a sec. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that's fine. So that's the deal here is so we push fitness big time on this crew, and we also push development of leadership. So how do we find our leaders? We find them through their ability to push themselves, and then whether or not they're coachable. Can they listen? Can they do that? So I feel like I kind of went off topic there a little bit, but I'll pause and make sure that I was kind of hitting what you were asking.
I'm really curious about, the prosecution of how you actually fight a wildland fire. And hot shots are like the initial attack guys, right? Along with smoke jumpers or direct attack. Go ahead.
No, hotshot crews are built for extended attack. We are
Extended
large.
attack.
We are
Okay.
large fire support resource. And I'm biased, right? I've been a hotshot for a long time, but here's the deal: is you don't have a large fire in this nation that you get success on without hotshots. You
Got it.
just don't. You don't, because it takes day in, day out of grinding and getting after it physically, but also the ability to make decisions under stress day after day in a changing environment, dictated by fire behavior, weather conditions that affect fire behavior, right? Weather, topography, fuels. Those three things come together to create fire behavior. You have to put yourself in scientist mode, if you will, and be able to rethink and be able to see the change in the environment. And they're not dramatic changes that you just feel all of a sudden, but they're there. You can see them if you're paying attention. We have great resources. You put an incident management team in place. You get a meteorologist, right?
Let's take a step back. Okay, so
Okay.
I live so just any national forest, and let's say we get a spark, and it's 5 miles from a subdivision. The wind's blowing towards a subdivision in a mountainous area, and there's a spark recorded and some smoke reported. How is that? What happens first?
So your coordination center and or your dispatch center for that
Okay.
area, and your ECC, your command center, right? Where you call that a person from the public sees it.
Right.
They call 911, right? They give a general location to the dispatch center or the 911 operator, and they then distribute that over to a map basically and say, hey, this is the general rough legal township section range, right? And then from there, or even a rough Latin long will be recorded for aircraft so that they can just get towards it. So typically, and I can speak to our dispatch center because that's the one I'm most familiar with,
Sure.
is they get the call. They're going to have a run card, a card that says on this day per fire danger, this is the amount of resources that should be dispatched for this area in this threat. So we'll use the exciting one, the large resource order that gets punched out. First call, typically going to be 2 aircraft. Our 3 aircraft is going to be an air tanker and a helicopter with aerial leadership. So an air attack platform. Typically that air attack platform or the helicopter, depending on kind of who's closer, is going to get on scene first because they fly, and they're going to acknowledge that the fire is there and the potential of that fire. They're likely going to give a quick size up.
Can we take a step back? You said that part of the decision on the resources are the day, and I assume that has to do, if it's August versus May, right? So
Yep.
If it's August, probably
Yep.
more resources. Go ahead, because it's hotter and drier.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. Fire danger dictates and also what is the threat potential.
Okay.
So those two things come together to give you your run card. And I'm sure some dispatchers would love to correct me on some stuff here, but anywho, and they'll get their chance. But anywho, you get some aircraft going. They'll kind of acknowledge they're generally going to get there first, depending, especially in our more rural locations. They're going to get there first. They're going to give us a size up, basically size of fire, potential of fire, and they will likely get a hold of dispatch and say, hey, continue the dispatch. This is here. This is a real thing. The first resource at scene will take over as incident commander. So if I'm the individual as a superintendent, I drive my own truck, right? Our configuration is 4 vehicles, got a superintendent truck, 2 buggies that carry 10 people each, and then a chase truck. I'm typically going to get there first because I just have the ability to move a little quicker as an individual. I have a captain and I have leadership. I tell them this is where we're going. I'll see you out there. Get a hold of me when you get close. Other resources may get there first, whatever. But in this run card, we might see a couple engines, a couple crews, a water tender. That first, what we'd kind of call a task force, about 5 to 7 resources, right? Something that stays within a span of control until you can get an organization set up. And then,
So let's say that peak, this is off and it's like a mile from the nearest road, and there's big potential for it. What would happen then?
so that's where probably our helitac crew, if you will probably be able to find an LZ somewhere.
Those guys are they fast open or are they landing?
They're landing.
Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
At least for us in our area, there are a few rappel ships. I don't know that there's any more fast roping helicopters. Last one I can remember was an El Dorado. But anyways, yeah. And then there's also, depending on a smoke jumper base, they could also be close. Say, put ourselves in Boise, Idaho, or something, and you potentially are going to get a load of jumpers first at scene, and they're going to kind of look, both Helitac and those folks, they're going to look at establishing control, organizational control, and what is the potential and what are the priorities for what they see on the ground. Some of those priorities could be logistical, being, hey, this is a long walk in. We're gonna need an LZ. So let's go ahead and start cutting an LZ. It's in the black. It's somewhere we have determined that the risk is lower.
In the black means it's already burnt.
Yep, already black on our safety zone, right? We don't necessarily want to put people in front of this thing because we haven't been able to develop our anchor. We haven't made our anchor to start working. So a mile in, that's not out of our wheelhouse. We're probably going to walk in.
Okay.
So
would you guys? How early would you be? You said hot shots or large fires. Would it have to develop and get through helitac crews or smoke jumpers before they would call hot shots, or would you guys get spooled up and head that way soon?
So
depending on the threat?
So if we're in station and there's a dispatch, we're going to be on that run card. We're going to get sent.
If you guys are not working some other fire, they're going to send you just in case. Got it.
Yeah. It's just what I kind of was getting at is our real creation was for large fire support. But when we're not on a large fire and there's a fire, we're going to go. We're not going to, especially in a district like the district I work for, which is called a full suppression district. So we get a start. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's full suppression. We're stopping it. There's no management on our district per our fire management plan. Like, it's all of our fires start here. We're full suppression. So the idea is hit it fast.
When you're talking about full suppression, I mean there can be, like if it's in a wilderness area or something where they'll let it burn, and that's up to the managing agency, I assume.
Yeah. Just even in our wilderness areas that we have on our district, it's full suppression.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, yep. So that's the difference here. Is we're working on our district is a desert climate. So our the desert, without getting too in the weeds on that, it's just a more sensitive environment or ecosystem to fire. So the fire return interval is going to be closer to 50 years as opposed to maybe a Ponderosa fire stand 5 to 10 years, where we want to see recurring fire.
Yeah, return interval. In other words, if it does burn, it's going to take 50 because of the the lack of water and how slow stuff grows. Got it. So they want to get to it faster.
Yeah, and our value at risk in a lot of our area is grazing land, which it's hard for maybe some folks to understand and say, hey, that's an economic driver, that's somebody's livelihood. So it's still a priority. So
you're talking federal. You're talking livestock grazing on federal land, right?
Yep, absolutely.
If you're not from the West, you don't understand that. But if you are from the West, you understand that livestock, they can't just the ranches are on the riverbeds and they raise hay all summer so they can feed the animals in the winter. They can't graze it.
Yeah. And it's and we're in a smaller community, right? So you burn somebody's winter grazing, and boy, that's a hardship. And that's a big deal. So, So anywho, like I think hopefully I've hit the points there. Is we're kind of gonna throw a lot at an initial attack here locally,
Got
and
it.
try and stop it small. Now there's factors, access, weather for that day, wind. Wind is the number one determining factor of fire spread and rate. Wind. If you have wind, you have potential. If
But
you so
I'm interested in getting into that idea. Now, I assume that part of what drives the wind is the bigger weather pattern, but also the thermals that are working in
yep,
mountainous areas.
yep.
Tell me specifically how wind is going to affect, or to your best of knowledge, a fire behavior on a mountainous terrain or hilly terrain.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to do is teach basic firefighter training.
Got it.
We'll be doing it in April, and one of the big things we do here is, and the word that anybody that's been taught this class from me is going to know exactly what I'm saying here, alignment. We call it alignment. So you get wind, you get feels, and you get topography, and they all point in the same direction. You're going to have potential, because there's one other little factor in there with fuel moisture content, like what stage is that fuel in its growing season? Is
Got it.
it going into dormancy or is it in green up, right? So you can have all those factors in an alignment, but you have a fuel type, so that's the fuels part, right? And that's one of those things. But let's think mid season here, and you have dry fuels, you have winds, and you have topography. Take the geographic area here. We're in the northeast corner of the state, right? Our winds generally come from the southwest. You can look at every fire history map here, and you can see southwest to northeast. That's the fire
That's where the
spread.
fires are moving. They're moving along the
Yep.
wind line. Got it.
So, and if we are true students of fire, like Paul Gleason has taught us to be, students of fire, if we are taking the time to learn these things and say, hey, man, we fight a lot of fire here, right? This is where we live. We have a busy state, clearly, but if you can just remember one thing and you fight fire in Northern California is, hey, man, the winds come from the southwest to west and fires move northeast to east. And when you get a drainage or a slope that's got westerly alignment, you probably are not going to be successful stopping the fire. So that comes down to strategy. And then you can determine your tactics, right? On what will work. But hopefully I kind of painted a picture there with that. And that's one of our biggest things to understand, is that there's a word, it's alignment, and in order to have large fire growth, you have to have alignment. You have to have the weather align with the topography, with the fuels. If you remove one of those, I'm not going to say it's impossible, because nothing's impossible, but the likelihood of large fire growth is going to be reduced.
So the wind and the fuel is obvious. Topography isn't quite as obvious. So if your prevailing winds are, let's say, moving from the west to the east, explain to me how topography impacts fire movement.
Okay, so that westerly aspect is going to have the potential with upslope to make a run with the wind. As it crests over that ridge and we start to what we call, so we've got head fire, flank fire, and backing fire. These are the three terms of the type of fire.
Okay.
Head fire is with alignment, right? Head fire means it's running. It's going. You've got your biggest flame lengths and flame heights for that fuel type possible when you have head fire. Flanking fire is the
What's a
cross-loading and
flame
avalanches.
length? What does flame length mean?
So the total length of the flame, and height is how tall it stands. So length, so height and length can get confused. When you say length, what you mean is from the base and the origination of where that flame is to the tip
So
of the flame.
if I was looking at a slope, if it's 800 meters from one end of the flame to the other end, that's length. Got it.
Yep. And then the height is just how tall up is it, right? So.
And what does the height indicate? The intensity of the fire or the fuel? What does the height matter?
The height matters for basically, actually, this is a good question for me to backtrack in my own analog here, is the flame length and height. The height is just another measurement. I think if we really want to keep it simple, the length is the most important.
Got it.
Because if the fire has the ability to reach further, it moves faster, right? So that's what I would kind of refer to it. Height is more of just kind of a measurement in my eyes, at least. Somebody could disagree, but it's just like, yeah, it's tall, but the length, is it reaching the next thing? That's what is going to drive. Like, that's going to maybe determine how wide is our fire break, how much are we going to need to how much are we going to need to cut, those type of things. Because our flame length, if we go in and put a line in, typically direct or indirect, we need to know what our flame lengths are. There's other tactics and strategies like backfiring, burnouts, those kind of things that help remove fuel. Ultimately, that bring those two numbers down. But I think to kind of get back here so you get the westerly move, it runs up the slope, and you kind of know, like, we might be able to be successful on the flank, so we can anchor, flank, and then pinch, right? We know the pinch is not going to happen on the west aspect, because with continuity of fuel loading, we know that it's going to take too much work. It's going to be too dangerous. There's not the right risk management things that we need to be able to go in front of this thing and stop it. So what we can, if we're paying attention to those three things, the wind or the weather, the fuels, and the topography, we know that, hey, it's going to run and it's going to go over the ridge. And when it goes over the ridge, it's going to lose the effect of the wind. It's going to lose the effect of the slope, and it's going to turn into a backing fire. Now, depending on the fuel loading, that backing fire could still be intense.
Hang on for a sec. So if I understand correctly, it's going to move up the ridge because it's being blown up the wind, up the ridge. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, it gets over the top of the ridge. It loses the effect of the wind. And so it'll burn slower down the ridge if it's not, because it's shielded. It's like because the ridge is shielding some of the wind effect. Got it.
You get that leeward effect where the wind is going to die off, and you potentially have the ability to go in, and so you anchored and you've been flanking, but you know that you're just going to have to keep following it until you get out of this topography.
What does flanking mean? You mean you're on the edges of the
yep.
Line, so you're trying to keep it from spreading horizontally.
Laterally.
That's what flanking is. Got it. Okay.
Yep.
What does anchoring mean? What is anchoring?
Anchor. So we will not engage fire if we can't develop an anchor point, meaning wherever we start digging line, the fire should not be able to hook around us. So we can use a road system. We can use a natural feature like a rock outcropping. We can use an old burn scar. Say there was a burn from a month ago. Well, let's anchor off of that, right? And start running a flank up and start flanking this thing to where when all of the things come out of alignment, my favorite thing to do is fight fire at night. Things lay down. We get the RHs come up. The weather starts to change. We might still have wind and topography.
What's a RH? When you say RH?
Relative. Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
So we might come into better conditions to be able to go and now start to pinch, right?
So that's when you're pinching. So when you need to anchor on either end of the flame line, then.
Yeah. So typically we'll go to the heel of the fire. The heel.
What's the heel?
So here you go. The heel is where maybe like the origin of the fire is, where it started.
Got it.
Okay. And then you have a right flank and a left flank, and then you have the head. So those are 4 key things to determine and make sure that are clear to all resources showing up. Here's the heel. Here's the anchor. Here's the right flank. Here's the left flank. Here's the head. Especially aircraft, because we need to make sure we're on the same page with them on where they're going to use retardant and these things, because they're typically going to be out in front of us, right? Trying to slow things down because we're not that fast. You can only cut so fast. You can only dig lines so fast. Equipment can come in and help expedite that process, but aircraft is much quicker at getting and maybe slowing the fire down. So we want to make sure that it's established really quick that this is the heel, this is the right flank, this is the left flank, this is the head. And then we can start to develop our strategy and tactics off of those 4 key things. And the idea, and what I'm describing here, to be clear, is a direct attack strategy. So we're going to have 1 foot in the black. I'm not sure if you've heard that term before, but our safety zone. So our safety zone is right there. All we have to do is take one step over, and we're in the black. We are not going to be caught off guard. So you need to have good, clean black for that to be effective, to know that you truly do have a safety zone right there. So I personally like direct strategy, right? Because we're bringing our safety zone with us. We're there with it, right? We're not out in front of this thing. We can see the main fire. We're in communication with people that can. Like we all are there. We have good communication. We just, hey folks, ain't working. Step over. Hey, we had a wind switch. Desert, light, flashy fuels. It's not uncommon to get a lightning start. Fire's running one way. Thunder cell moves away. Wind switch comes back 90 degrees, 180 degrees. Yeah, it's like, oh, here it comes. Just step over here. Sucks. You just lost your work, but everybody's okay. They just stand there. They wait. Tell them eat a bean, get some water. We'll let this thing do its thing, and let's go. We're gonna start over. But anyways, that's what I wanted to be clear as I'm describing very much a direct attack strategy, because I really believe that's our wheelhouse on
If
this
you
cruise.
would you try to have a resource on either flank?
Yep, depending on what you have.
Right.
So you can get busy nationally. Preparedness levels, right? We nationally we have preparedness levels 1 through 5.
Yep.
Last year we got to a preparedness level 5, and that means that there's a strain on resource availability. There's more need than what's available. So you may, especially if you're in an area like we are, it's going to take 2-3 hours to get the additional resources. So you're going to need to prioritize a flank based on values at risk.
Values at risk could be structures or something else. Got
Yep,
it.
structures, grazing land, timber harvest, you name it, potential watersheds, whatever is deemed to be that value at risk. The incident commander and his resources, or their resources, I should say, can kind of determine here's the priorities and the values at risk. And so we have to determine.
What they're. Let me just. I'm a dumb strength coach, so just let me kind of make sure I understand where we're at right now. So the fire's going. You have ideally you have resources on both flanks. You're waiting for some change in topography, a drop in wind or something, where you start to get control, and then you pinch the fire from the flanks to put it out. Am I correct?
Yep.
That's kind of how you kind of do it on a direct attack fire.
Yep. And just a couple terminology things there is we're going to contain the fire,
Contain it.
and then we're going to control it, and then we're going to put it out.
So contain means you have to build something in front of the fire so it can't cross it. That's your fire line, right?
Yep. So we have 100% line around it. So
Got it.
we have stopped. So one of the terms would be we stopped forward progress. We have stopped the spread of this fire. We've contained it. Now we need to control it, meaning we need to start doing the stuff, the unglorious side of this job. We need to start digging in the dirt, and we need to start finding all the little embers, crawling around on our hands and knees, putting our hands in the dirt, doing the real work, in my opinion. Hey, you just busted your butt to put all this work in, and you want to make sure it stays successful. You got to go in there and you've got to start mopping up. Because if you don't, you don't mop up, the potential's still there. That's why it's only called contain. We start mopping up. Now we'll take the fire to a controlled status,
Got
and
it.
each office or district has a different protocol for when they call a fire out. But ours is typically, hey, 72 hours, no heat, no smoke. That's going to be, so you take a 500,000 acre fire, no heat, no smoke is going to take a long time.
Right. So
So
let's talk about your before contain. You're on the flank. You got 1 foot in the black. The fire is burning right there. You can see it. What are you doing? With you, because you're not carrying water with you, right? What are you doing to try to stop that fire? You're cutting ahead of it. What are you doing specifically?
yeah, so we're typically our what it's going to look like in an ideal situation. We can only take so much heat as humans, right?
Right.
So a lot of what we're going to do, and this is just like perfect scenario, right? We have the things that we need. We're going to try and get an aircraft to work with maybe one of my leads, our squad leaders or captains, to cool the edge off right in front of us.
Got
And
it.
then the rest of the crew is going to remove the vegetation down to bare mineral soil to contain the fire. So there's going to be something to cool it. Or, sometimes fires just lay down and you don't need water. You just need to go in there and secure it. Right. But in this situation, we're talking about some flames. We're going to try and get an aircraft out in front of us. Maybe it's a fixed wing aircraft, retardant. They're going to run some retardant out in front of us, and then we're going to back it up. We're going to come in and we're going to cut out all the little edges. We're going to follow that black edge to the T. We're not going to cut corners. We're going to follow it. We're going to make sure that there's bare mineral soil up against that black edge so that we can ensure that the spread is stopped. Right. So we're going to use chainsaws and hand tools to do that and move forward with that aircraft. Or we get our homies with us with an engine and they show up, or maybe they're already there. They're running a hose lay right there with us, cooling the edge. And that's fun. That's fun stuff. And that's the good stuff where, because we can get, as hot shots, we can say, hey, we're the lead, we're the front, we're the tip of the spear. But you can't take heat without water. And so we need everybody to work together.
So when the aircraft is laying down retardant or water, is it laying it down ahead of the flame or on the flame?
So you can, like me as a superintendent, I might be coordinating with an air attack supervisor. And
Right.
sometimes, depending on what I'm seeing on the ground, I might ask for a little bit of a head, like a little bit off the edge to allow maybe for the edge to straighten out. So
Got
because
it.
if we can straighten the edge out, we'll be quicker. Or
Because
I'm
if the
saying,
edge's jagged, it's hard to drive the line in front of it. Go ahead.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So we'll be like, hey, like talking to the air attack, be like, hey man, can you kind of run this off straight from this point? Pick some geographic areas and say, hey, or some landmarks, I should say, and say, hey, can you run from here to here? I'll use a signal mirror or a strobe, kind of show them my location and communicate with them on the radio, but also where I'm at with some sort of a signaling device and say, hey, this is what I'm talking about right here. Start here, take it as far as you can, but let's run straight. And a lot of those air attack supervisors, they were in my shoes. They know what I'm looking for. They know
Got
what
it.
I'm talking about, and we're going to try and straighten that out. Or there's other circumstances where it's like, hey, it's in a good spot. Give me half in, half out. What I mean by that is throw half on the fire and put half outside of it. So they're running right down it because I want it to stop.
Got
I
it.
want it to stop right there. And I need that retardant. And I'm speaking about retardant, I guess, right now, but I need that little bit of a leeway still, though, that gives me time to get there, right? Because the initial hit knocks out the flame, but it's going to rekindle.
Right.
Nobody did anything to stop it. We needed time. When we're using retardant in our district, we're buying time. We're always buying time with retardant. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to buy time. Retardant is, in my opinion, is ineffective without boots on the ground. You have to go in and back it up. So
You're trying to contain it. You're cutting ahead of it. How wide do you have to go? It just depend on obviously depends on the vegetation, but I mean, are you looking like a 10 foot like a road? What are you looking for in terms of how wide a vegetation got to cut?
it depends on the
Depends on the
size of the
wind,
vegetation. Yeah, the
everything, right?
wind and the size of the vegetation. But when we're going direct, we're talking about us being up against a black edge that already burned.
Yeah.
So the flame lengths and heights are going to be less than they were when that was green vegetation. So
Okay.
our line, like we're especially like if we're on initial attack or we're trying to stop some progress of a fire, our line's going to be a little bit narrower, a little bit smaller because we're trying to make progress. And then what we're hoping for is support behind us
Narrower
to
and
people to come
smaller.
in.
Like what is narrower?
The saw cut might be a little narrower. The scrape is not going to be like 2 feet wide. It's going to be just enough. And that's something, some folks maybe don't like the way we do that because we're out there just stopping spread.
Got it.
And then our whole thing is like, hey, we're stopping spread and we need the folks behind us to help us secure it. So, because ideally, right, you just kind of move as one big happy family up this piece of line, or you're leapfrogging is another term. Like hotshot crews will be leapfrogging, taking bumps on each other.
Right.
They tie into the back of you, they take a bump, and then you tie in and bump. And anywho, so that's hard to kind of give like there's no specific spec. Like I'll never tell my crew specifically unless it's an indirect line. When we go indirect, I'll say, hey man, it's going to be a 2 foot scrape, 50 foot cut. that's one of those times I'll say, hey, this is the spec, but when we're going direct, I say, do what you need to do to stop it. And they figure it out. And then through just experience, they realize when it needs to be wider, when it needs to be narrower. But no matter what, the hand line itself always needs to be down to bare mineral soil, because it otherwise it's not there. It's not lined. So
Right, because you can spread along the ground vegetation then.
Yeah. So that's where, as a superintendent, I shouldn't be, if I've done my job in critical AD and development of my leadership, I shouldn't have to give them a spec on the saw cut and scrape when we're going direct. They should be able to take what they're seeing and their experience and be able to implement the appropriate tactic.
I can understand the scrape. That's scrape it down a bit. What do you mean by you say saw cut? What's a saw cut?
So just going in, lemon ladder fuels, knocking brush out, taking those chainsaws and creating a saw cut, like a swath through vegetation,
and then the guys come behind it to got it.
Yep.
So you have a squad, and each squad is 3 to 7 people, maybe
5 to 7.
5 to 7. Just one sawyer or more than one?
There's a saw team, so there'll be a Sawyer Swamper combo. We do. I used to say we do it different, but we run what's called tank to tank. So if you run a tank, and then I'll run a tank. You run a tank, then I'll run a tank.
So you're a gas tank on the saw.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And the swamper is a guy or the person who moves the limbs after they're cut.
Yep. Yeah. The number one determining factor of hotshot crew pace is how good are your sawyers. How good are they? Because that's our bread and butter, man. We run chainsaws. That's what we do. We remove fuel. That's our thing. We cut trees and remove fuel.
How big are your chainsaws? What are you running for saws specifically?
We're running the steel 462s right now, with 28-inch bars. They're our workhorse, man. They can get into a tree and they can cut brush all day long. Then we carry a complement of felling saws, a couple 500 eyes, and then a couple 6.61s. Some big saws with 32, 36, and 48-inch bars. We have big timber.
Big saws that you can take with are you carrying extra fuel with you? You go back to the truck for the fuel, or guys?
We use if you're familiar with like SIG canisters, like MSR SIGs, we carry typically a breakdown on a squad is going to be.
So this is like I'm kind of familiar with it, but it's like a water bottle or a big water bottle. Am I thinking right?
I think they're like roughly probably somewhere between 32 and 40 ounces. I actually don't know how many ounces are in them.
These are mixed fuel, right? Probably.
Yeah, two-stroke. And then you'll run, so per squad, typically there'll be 7 or 8 of those canisters, and then 3 oil SIGs for the bar oil.
Oh, wow. Okay, so and per squad, and that's 2 guys. Or no, the squad, is that fuel split up amongst the squad, or just a swamper and the sawyer have it?
We spread, our thing is we spread the weight out to everybody.
Got it.
So we don't expect our sawyers, who hands down are working the hardest.
Yep.
They already have the chainsaw, so we need to spread their weight out. They also carry their chain, their extra chains, their saw repair kits. They carry a lot. They carry a lot of stuff on top of what they need to just work for the day, food and water wise. Right. So
how many chains are they carrying each day out? I'm sure they got sharpened chains, but a lot, right?
Yeah. That's a funny subject, and I laugh because you can tell who's good and who's not by how many chains they're sharpening at the end of the day. Are they?
The better guys are sharpening less chains, then I guess.
Yep, exactly.
Because they're not hitting rocks and stuff.
They're not hitting rocks. And that's also back to kind of our fitness thing, right? Our fitter people generally are going to be on our saws because they drive our pace. They work the hardest. And they're also that next step in leadership and decision making. I can't be there. So put myself back to when I was a squad leader here. I can't just sit there with my sawyer and say, cut this, cut that, cut this, cut that. I need that individual to think 3 cuts ahead. And he needs to step up, say, these are the 3 cuts, boom, boom, boom. Look, 3 cuts, boom, boom, boom. And this saw partner needs to know what those three cuts are as well. It's a beautiful thing to watch, man. Watch two people get after it on a good saw team. The way they can roll brush and the way they can just move efficiently is the big thing. They're not moving frantically. They're moving efficiently. And it's fun to watch. And you get 4 or 5 chainsaws teams together in what we call progressive cut, and it's fun to watch. I'll have to send you a video at some point of just some brush we got into this year in Southern California. It's good stuff. It's fun to watch.
And so you'll what you've done all these jobs coming up.
Yep.
What's the most fun? Is being on the saw teams the most fun? What's the most fun?
Oh man, that's a hard one.
Or is it all fun?
I think it's all fun, but there's elements of it, right, that are fun. On the saw team, what was fun was not maybe in the moment, but it's like I can look back and you know there's a thing in shared suffering, right, where you're it's 110 degrees, you're in what I call like triple overhead brush, to steal some surfer terminology. Like the brush is just towering above you, and you make it like a quarter mile in a day, but you ran 10 tanks. And it's just like, at the end of the day, you're just smoked. And at that moment, you're like, dude, I'm glad the day's done. But you look back as a crusty old superintendent and you go, that was cool, man. That was fun, you know, and it's like, I don't know if I could do it again, but I did it and it was great. And I know what that suffering feels like. But I'd say the most fun job I had on this crew is right now as the superintendent. But the most development I got was definitely when I was a lead. I was in that first level leadership role. I was transitioning.
So that's the squad leader or the assistant soup?
Before all of that, there's a lead.
Okay.
So here, I my bad. I should explain this. On a squad, you have a squad leader,
right?
A saw team, 3 to 4 toolers, and 1 lead. So the squad leader can leave and make sure things are square, and that lead can manage the squad. And or what was fun for me, and I got picked a lot for it, was the special ops stuff. You're going to go do this. You're going to go work with the aircraft. Hey, we need somebody to go interior and light this stuff up. We need somebody to go do this. We need somebody that understands fuel, fire, and fire behavior, and we need to create some heat in here to pull this back in, type of thing. And that's where I learned the most about fire behavior, was as a lead, because I got that opportunity. I also got the opportunity to shadow my superintendent. I got to hang out with him, excuse me, and see his leadership style and his thinking process and how he was going to deliver the message to the crew. I got to be a part of that development of his plan and his idea, because I was his information getter. Hey, I need you to go walk this line. Hey, I need you to go do this. I need you to go scout this. Tell me what you think. He just wants to hear what I think. I'm not making the decision.
Right.
He's making the decision, but I'm just going to come back with some data, some intel.
He's pulling you out individually. The squad leader staying with the squad, but he's saying, Dan, I need you to go do this, and you get to go do these individual actions. When it comes to supervision here, we had this discussion before, and we asked a question one time. What is more? Can you respect this is a military or tactical leader who was unfit? And most of the answers came back no. But there were some contrarian answers, and with the acknowledgement that my brigade commander or whatever isn't running the line with me. I want that guy not to get me killed. I want him to make sure I've got enough ammo, that he understands the tactics. In other words, there was the mental and tactical element of running the operation like you described, in terms of making sure your guys are safe for stuff. In your experience, have you, I guess in your own leadership style, certainly you need to set some example in terms of leadership, but not at the expense of knowing fire behavior and stuff. I assume. Go into that for me. I mean, as you've moved up the chain now, what's most important now? You set the standard for physicality, or you know how to keep your guys safe and how to fight a fire?
Yeah. So I chat with one of our leads here quite a bit about leadership and stuff here. One of your contributing writers actually, and we spend a lot of time, and she picks my brain on this stuff, and I love it. I love to get to share my thought and see her puzzled look when I say something wrong. But point here is, I've always gone back and forth, and I've always said, like, hey, my leadership style is I'm going to be out there. I want my finger on the pulse, right? I'm going to be out there with you. I have a responsibility to make sure that the information and communication flow through adjoining resources and what we're working and who we're working for as a division group supervisor or an incident management team or an incident commander, that their mission or vision, that we're meeting their intent. That's really my job, is to make sure that I'm a conduit to that. But I personally want to be out there with them to see what the progress is. What are they actually running into, right? So I put a high level of physical fitness standard on myself, right? I don't believe, I honestly, that's my leadership style, and I think it's a good leadership style. And I see a lot of other superintendents that live by that way. But there's also some of our older superintendents that the fact is, man, they have experience. They have something that a lot of us, even as I'm going into my 8th year as a superintendent, they still have more experience than me, and they have a different leadership style, and their crews are fine. Their crews are still getting after it, right? Because their crews respect them, because they understand that these individuals have the experience needed to make good decisions, right? Now, a lot of these folks, I think, is where part of this transition in the culture, right, is there's a culture that I think some of these other superintendents grew up with, of work hard, play hard, extracurricular, maybe some bad habits that just they weren't educated on, and their bodies break down. And they're trying to get after it day in, day out, get after it, and their bodies break down, and they kind of hit a point where they're like, man, I can't do that. I can't be an effective strategist and a physical beast. I'm too broken, right? And so this really pushes why I push such a big culture of fitness here with Diamond Mountain. And I'm like, hey, I want you to have a long, healthy career. I want you to be able to step out of the truck and not go, oh, like, I want you to be able to move with fluidity and enjoy your off time. And in particular, enjoy the time when you're here. But I think leadership wise, there's a lot to say about experience. And these superintendents I'm talking about, these guys are 20+ year hot shots. You can't tell me they haven't put the time in, right? But they're not that image of fit, right? But they can go toe to toe in strategy and tactics and good decision making with the best of them. And I respect them because they also deliver well. They really deliver their message as well. And I think that's probably where I would say fitness is important, and it's a good marker to say I set the bar, I lead by example, right? But if you can't deliver the example with a good as a good communicator, then the message is lost. So you can be fit and you can be amazing and you can be the fastest you can be a superintendent that's faster than anybody on your crew, but if you can't deliver a message, then you're an ineffective leader. So that's just my opinion. And I can say, like, some of these superintendents I'm talking about, they're good communicators and they deliver good messages, and they don't have to be out there right with their SAW teams. They don't have to be swinging their tool because they deliver a good message. They still hold a standard and they deliver that message. Now, you'd have to ask their employees specifically how they feel about that, but that's just my observation and working with these superintendents as a peer-to-peer. Is I'm like, hey, these guys I respect them. They are making good decisions. I agree with their decisions. I agree with their strategy and tactics that they're delivering to me and their crews out there. The only difference is that once we're done at the truck, I'm going to go see what the crew's doing. I'm going to go walk the line, because it's my leadership style to say, hey, did the decisions I make, are they actually transpiring on the line? Are they actually accurate? Because I can key the radio and ask my captain, hey man, how's it going? And I'm gonna get his opinion or their opinion, or my leads or whoever. I'm gonna get their opinion, but it's their opinion over a radio. When I've done all my superintendent jobs, My next job is to go and just make sure it's working. And that's just my style, right? And folks, maybe, maybe that's just been a thing for my crew here. We've had these kind of experience gaps where I've just had to be, which I've had to just be maybe a little more involved, right? Because to make sure that, and you can ask my crew or anybody from my crew, what I tell them my number one job is to do is to take all the experience and knowledge I have and get it to them as quickly as possible. That's my job. My job and my responsibility as a superintendent and as a leader in fire is to make sure that all the people that I get to work around and be around and influence, that I take my experience and distribute it to them as quickly as and digestible as possible. That's my job.
What's your biggest leadership mistake that you've made as superintendent?
As superintendent, I think talking too much sometimes, definitely, I don't have like a specific, like, oh, I did this type of thing. I can think of little moments. I had an individual that was maybe not cutting it physically, and I got too emotional. On top of a PT hike, and we had just been covering some fatality stuff and was really trying to hit this message home. And this individual was kind of dragging on with us, right? And not like and I know you probably get what I'm saying here. You could just tell like this individual has more, they're just not giving it. And you're like, hey man, do you like, and I got too emotional. I got too in the moment of where we were, and I didn't handle the situation right to where I was then stuck, kind of having to walk the edges with this individual and potential grievances, because I just didn't keep my mouth shut and just leave it to the work and let the work weed this individual out. My intent was to motivate the individual, but the way that I did it was wrong.
Got it.
Words that I used and the delivery was wrong.
Tell me about your hill.
Yeah, Mo. It's been here. It's a huge part of our culture and tradition, and I believe wholeheartedly it has developed this crew, and it has developed me. It is 2,000 vertical feet, under 60 minutes, and about a mile and a half, a little less than a mile and a half. Full gear, depending on position. Packs will weigh between 35 and 45 pounds. That's their packs, and then our sawyers carry their saw. That's what they carry. And that's our standard. You got to make it up the hill 3 times in a row to get your color, to get your logo. We don't just hand our shirts out. You've got to show that you can meet this standard 3 times in a row. And then we'll hand our shirts out to them. And then, you're part of the gang. We hike it every day in the first 2 weeks. We understand that there's a grind.
2 weeks of 80 hours of training.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so they'll do 5. So we'll do 5 days, 5 8-hour days, and then take 2 days off, and then another 5 days. So we'll hike every day. And folks have rebutted and said, how can you? Because I talk a lot about fitness with folks and recovery and how to take care of yourself. I said, this isn't about recovery. This is about determination. This is about showing up the next day to do it again. And then guess what? We're going to do it again. And then guess what? We're going to do it again. And now we're going to start cutting line. Now we're going to hike up and we're going to cut line because that's what we do, right? And it's the true determining factor of fire line readiness. I know if I take myself back to all the other positions below squad leader, I was showing my peers that I was ready, that I had their back, that I was ready, because everybody has a bad day, and that I was going to be there and be able to pick up the slack when needed. And that I did what was required of me in the off season. And that's my expectation of myself all the way down the chain on this crew. I need to be able to show, I personally need to be able to show, I hike. So let me back up. The superintendent, starting back with Kurt LaRue, who in 93 took over the crew. He said, he set the standard. He says, if the crew hikes, the soup hikes. Plain and simple. You will not send the crew to hike PT wise. Like the crew's going to hike into fire sometimes when I have to do some other things.
Right,
but
right.
for PT, like we're going to show up to the bottom of Mo. Oh, you're not going up it without me. Like that's the thing. Like if I can't hike the hill, like this is bad maybe, but like say if something comes up, like hey I can't hike today. I got to go to this meeting. Like if I get injured or something, we'll make some changes. But if I'm healthy and ready and able, they're not hiking without me. So, and that's just how it is. That's how it's been for every superintendent that's been on this crew, and I have no
Well,
intention
I
of
think
changing that.
anybody who's done a lot of, I have a buddy in Wyoming, and he says nothing trains like vertical, and anybody. Mark Twight had a standard unloaded 2,000 vertical feet at 45 minutes. So you guys are getting up there with 30 to 45 pound packs plus their tool or whatever. That's a no fucking joke effort. I mean, I had
Oh yeah,
just outside my gym there in Wyoming had I think it was like 900 feet, and I think the fastest I got it up unloaded, and I was pretty good hiking uphill. I could beat all my coaches anyway. There were some mountain athletes I couldn't beat who were walking lungs, but my fastest up it was 19 minutes. So and I don't know if I could have kept that pace for another 1,000 vertical feet. I mean, that's a no friggin' joke effort right there. I don't think people understand. And mile and a half. I mean, that's like if you're in Jackson, Snow King is like 1,700 vertical feet, and I think the fastest I've been up at with skis and stuff is I think the fastest I've been up at unloaded is like 35 minutes. So yeah, and it's not a mile and a half either. It's pretty straight up. You're covering some. It's going to take 10 minutes just to walk, a mile and a half horizontally flat, and you can do that uphill. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
no joke. And you're letting your everybody who's been there knows that's coming, and the people are coming. They should know it's coming. How are you telling them to train for that?
yeah.
Step
So
ups, lots of step
yeah,
ups, I guess.
totally. So I definitely I love sharing this because we just got some animals, man. We've got people that are hitting sub 40 on our hill.
That is frig. I mean, I've seen kids in the Marines run sub 8 minute miles with 45 pound packs. I mean, there's some
Yeah.
beasts out there, but man, vertical is a different animal.
Yeah, it's super impressive and it's super motivating to me, right? Because like I know that you never know, like we have this attrition rate and you bring in some just animals and you're like, all right, my goal, one of the former assistant superintendents here, Kevin McGurr, he had a rule. He said, I will not be beat by a rookie. That's what he said, no
Uh-oh.
matter what. And
Uh-oh.
this dude just pound for pound strongest dude. And boy, he lived up to it. He did it. He never let a rookie beat him. And that's just something, and he was, pushing 35, 37, I can't remember what it is. He moved on to a metro department, but yeah, I always loved that. And when he said that, I was like, that's right, man. That's our leadership culture here. Like we will not be beat by rookies. And it's just a mentality, right? But when we get to the top and that rookie beats me, the first thing I'm going to do is say, good job.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you did your work. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you showed up ready,
So
right? And so
is there
what
a
do
trail up there? Can guys spread out? I mean, if you're
yeah.
ahead of a guy, does he say track? Like old Nordic skiing I used to do when I was a kid. You had to get out of the track, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we have the first maybe 2 minutes of the hike. We're in our tool order, and then we hit this ditch, and it's a free for all. There ain't no sandbagging. It's
Yeah.
meant to be a race.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
meant to be a race, and there's no yeah. Like so, if somebody's gonna try and pass me, I'm not gonna make it easy. Like I'm not gonna stop and let you pass me.
They
You're
got
gonna
they got to
have
work
to.
their way around you, huh? Up the
Yeah,
trail.
they
Yeah.
might, and sometimes you'll see people they just start crashing through brush, and
Got
the
it.
only rule I have, and for me, if you want to make me mad, is pass me and then make me have to pass you, like, but that's all good. Like that's the competitive side. Like, but I'm gonna let you know when you pass me and now I'm passing you back, I'm gonna let you know that you screwed up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you didn't pay attention to your body and you didn't listen to your pace, right? And because that's a big message here as we're trying to teach these kids through that type of effort that hey, you always have to be aware of where you're at and what you're doing and how you're managing your fatigue,
Right.
right? That's so what do we do, right? So what do we do? We have a great group of folks, and we have a page called Discord. It's a Discord page, and we share information So we use fitness as an
So
anchor.
this is like your just your Hotshot Crew Discord page. Got it.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So it's an invite only, as candidates. Like, so right now we're still waiting to do the resumes and interviews and select candidates, but we have probably 25, 30 people that are routinely talking to us, and we're putting them on PT plans. We're saying, this is what you need to do. And a fella named Matt Rader, he turned me on to you, actually. He
Yeah, I
said, hey,
remember
you
Matt.
should,
Yeah.
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 And he said, hey man, this is it. Because I was trying to figure it out, because and I love this crew, right? But when I first showed up here, they said, hey, we got a hill, you should learn it. That's what the warning was. I got
Yeah.
that in January. And I was like, okay, like, I hike all the time. I'm coming from another hotshot crew. Whatever, man. Like, I'm good. I showed up and got broke. Like, I had a best friend on the crew, and his name was Dustin Poe, and he said he didn't talk to me. He didn't talk to me. I didn't make it up the hill the first day, and he didn't talk to me for like 2 months. He was, and I was like, oh, dude, like, this is my best friend, man. I went to middle school with him all the way up, and he stopped talking to me. And I was like, okay, this is real. Like, this crew is real. And anyways, so I said, okay, that's all the information I got. And I said, okay, that's fine. And then I watched over the years, I watched this attrition rate, right? I was watching us hire 25 people and 6 people wash on day 2. And I was like, and we were stubborn, man. We were like, it doesn't matter. We'll be a strong 16 over a weak 20, right? And like, I was like, okay, I get it. Because it wasn't my leadership at that time. I was a leader inside the crew, but I was like, okay, like, but what if we took some time and said, hey, because these kids are traveling from across the country
Yeah.
to come here.
Yeah.
So we have a responsibility to provide a tool to them, because I have a responsibility to provide a resource, right? To be nationally available to go fight fire. I can't do that if I'm just so stuck on a standard, which the standard that I'm stuck on, but the how to get to the standard is just like, I'm not going to give these folks time, and I'm not going to give them my time and effort to see them succeed. But I'm going to say, it's written in our standard operating procedures. One of our first bullets is, we will encourage success. I just elaborated on that more and said, well, we're going to encourage success, but we're also going to provide the tools that we believe will get you to success. Right. So we worked with Raider, and he did a lot of good stuff for us. And we definitely fall very much in line with, I'd say, what your ethos is with your organization, and what type of the tactical athlete and the training for the job. Right. So we've taken, over the years, we've figured out, like, hey, this is what we're training for. These are the modalities. These are also the things that our athletes like to do. These folks do this stuff. And so we figured out, like, hey, what are the tools? Like, Hot Shots always ran, right? Well, Diamond Mountain's not known as a running crew, but it's a tool. It's a tool to train, right? Aerobic capacity. We can build aerobic capacity through zone 2, long duration, steady state. We can build this capacity. We can start to build their engine. So we do, the fellas actually just finished it up. Sorry, Megan, she's involved in that too. Just finished taking up what we're calling our on-ramp.
Good.
Maybe I'd be able to share this with you sometime and get your feedback, because you'll recognize it. Definitely your templates. We respect and appreciate everything that you offer to our community. I want to say that first and foremost, and what you've offered to this crew through conversations that I've had with you before. You've taught me a lot, and although we've only spoken a couple times, there's been lessons learned for me. So point being is, we've taken, say, hey, these are the things. I got a lot of runners. On my crew. I'm a runner, right? I like running. I am also a backcountry ski athlete. I love backcountry skiing. And so we said, okay, what are these things? Like, what do we need to do to support these hobbies and the development to this thing? Because we are a unique bunch of people. We absolutely hate structure, but love structure. We're actually, I always say, Wildland Fire is a land of misfit toys. Like it's, like former athletes at D1 or this or that, but didn't want to push professionally into that level. They didn't like this or that part. We're the land of misfit toys. So we get these folks together and we've kind of realized over the years, okay, what are the things that we really need to train for? Step ups. Yep. That's it. You can't replicate our PT hill anywhere. We can give some data points on it and say, hey, find something similar. Because you're right, train vertical and you'll be ready for vertical. The deal with Mo is that it's a south-facing aspect. There's no shade. There's no wind. It's just got all these elements that come together. Kurt LaRue
So
did a
it's
damn
hot.
good job.
It's hot
Yeah.
too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Kurt LaRue did a damn good job of finding, because you know what he did? He said, hey, this crew had some trouble the year before, got in trouble. I'm going to come in and I'm going to take away the potential for them to get in trouble at night. Because guess what? We're going to hike this hill every day.
Got it.
So anyways, so we've taken these concepts and said, hey, what do we need to do? We need to build aerobic capacity because we are endurance athletes when it comes down to it, but we need to make sure that the foundation is strong. We need to make sure that strength training is also a priority, and we periodize this stuff. So we take this Discord page and we kind of develop. So we develop. It's to a point now where we've developed a fall kind of recovery and strength block, and potentially a little bit of aerobic capacity. This year, I transitioned more to aerobic capacity this year, and then now I'm switching into a strength block anyways. And we're kind of seeing like that's what's fitting our people. They're like, hey, we kind of want to do like maybe 2 days of strength, but we also want to go recreate with mountain bikes or run. And but hey, like, I challenge them and say, hey, why don't you track that though? And like give yourself some like tangibles here to increase your capacity actually, so that you can come back. The challenge is if you come back to this crew, you're faster, you're better than you were. And that can be in any element. It can be in any element. It's just you're better. Okay. That's the expectation. So that's the thing. We've taken these plans and say, hey, we really encourage strength training. We really encourage that. We believe
Yeah, I mean,
in that.
carrying 45 pounds and a saw or even a tool is significantly more load than backcountry skiing. Or definitely running.
Yep.
So
Yep.
there is this really interesting upper body strength and strength endurance element to that work.
Yep. And then the best thing that ever came to this crew in the PT realm was a sandbag.
I love sandbags. Yeah.
Yeah, because you got 20 of us, potentially 25 people, and you
Right.
don't always have the time that it takes. So we've shifted once we get through our first 2 weeks, and these folks have got their colors on, their gray shirts. Now it's my responsibility to treat these people like professionals, and treat them like professionals and give them the space to PT like professionals. We hike on what is our Monday and what is our Friday. We hike on those caps, and those 2 days in the middle, as we get later in the season and we're in station, I call it free PT. I say, hey, you guys do what you need to do. We got a full rack set up in the gym, and we got sandbags and stuff. But until we get to that point, if there's still like some need, so like we know that first 2 weeks, we know we ground them down. So we need to change the stimulus a little bit into those third and fourth weeks. So we'll hike and then we'll do some sandbag stuff. We'll use the sandbag as muscular endurance or kind of like a strength training. A lot of sandbag complexes, things like that, to just a lot of pushing and pressing with sandbags, push-ups, pull-ups, all that, all the stuff that you can do with limited equipment, right? With 20 people. So that sandbag, when we took on the sandbag, which Matt Rader and sounds like conversations with you, was like, yeah, man, like this is it. This is our thing. Like, and once we adapted to that
Yeah,
sandbag,
I don't think that anybody out there uses sandbags like we do, especially for our chassis integrity work. And they've really moved to really interesting work capacity stuff. One of the things I want to ask you about is, in my experience working with wildland firefighters, is really I found uneven commitments to professional fitness amongst the individuals and crews I've worked with. I can't tell you how many times I've worked out and offered to work with people for free and not had individuals like yourself follow through. It's always been puzzling to me, especially given there's the real fucking danger of the job, right? I want to get into that a little bit, but is your experience with other crews that the same, or it seems like there's this mystique that their hotshot crews have great, fitness, but it's been uneven in my own experience in talking to guys and working with them.
Yeah, I had the luxury of being raised on this crew, really,
Got it.
and the leadership that I had was was no bullshit. They said you need to be fit or you don't belong here, type of deal. And they expected us to be fit, and we held a standard. We still hold the same standard that Kurt LaRue put in place in '93.
Got it.
So so we still hold that same standard. We just changed our modalities to get there because there's so much information, and I have one of the best parts about being on a hotshot crew and even the rates of attrition that we have is you get to bring in so many smart people, you get to bring in so many ideas, and you get to develop and see, hey, this is actually a very functional fitness plan. If we take this sandbag, we take our hill, we take this sandbag, and then we take some running, if you will, or some sort of capacity work, chassis integrity, all that stuff, and we combine these things, we can be more fireline fit, right? So we push that pretty hard here. But what I see and what I think, you get I always explain things as a pendulum. You get a pendulum swing, right? So we had the original pendulum swing of you got to be fit, you got to crush. And I'm saying, when I say we at this point, I'm saying fire culture,
Right.
like everybody. Hey, we need you to be really fit, but we're not going to teach you how to recover, right? So okay, so now we're breaking people. So now people are injured and hurt and don't know how to recover. Are they, they play hard as well. They go out and get hammered, basically. They overconsume alcohol or whatever. Just bad habits form through whatever reason, coping mechanisms, things like that. And then, then now the pendulum has swung the other way, where it's like, well, we got to be all about recovery because they just worked hard all summer. And I'm like, okay, cool, like definitely recovery to me is a day-to-day process. It's it's a healthy sleep routine. It's a good nutrition. It's mobility work, and it's a volume and intensity controlled fitness plan, right? That's what recovery looks like to me. It's not, hey, it's December and I ain't gonna do shit for a month.
Got it. Yeah.
And then I'm just, and then I think that's where hopefully I'm making sense to you on the culture, is I think that becomes an excuse. And I'm very opinionated, and this is all my opinion, is like, I believe this has become an excuse. Well, it's December. I need, I'm taking a break. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, dude, you're not. In fact, what you're doing is a detriment. You're driving your body into the ground because now you just stop. Now you're probably using some poor coping mechanism for stress and fatigue that you built over the year. You're breaking your body down, and now you're sitting here saying, I've given myself this excuse to not do anything because I had this hard year, when really what you should at a minimum be doing is getting out, go on a walk, man. Go walk at least. Like, do some push-ups and pull-ups. Like, don't stop moving. If we've seen anything in our society these days, is stagnation is killing us. So like, stop. Like, stop using recovery as an excuse. And I think that's what's happening, is like, people will go on a roll and it'll be tough, but we go on a roll and we don't necessarily go hit the hill the next day unless it's early season. And I'm gonna work with my overhead and say, hey, okay, we had that roll. What was it like for you guys? Was it hard? Was it easy? Was it moderate? Man, we pre-poed. We hung out in Colorado. We didn't do anything. We just, we basically just used some fire station's gym every morning for 14 days, but
Got
didn't
it.
see a
Yeah.
lick of fire. Like, guess what? We're going to go home and we're going to hit the hill. We're going to hit the hill. Now, we go on a rip and fire and we're busting butt, getting things done. And these guys are running 10 tanks a day. Guess what? We're going to come in and I'm going to say, hey, free PT. Get yourselves loose, stretch out. We're going to hike tomorrow. Type
That's
of
kind of
deal.
interesting when you can kind of judge how hard the fire was by the number of the tanks that are used, because everybody's working, right? That's kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about. I want to talk about the most dangerous aspect of the work, and I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the most dangerous is the drive to the fire. But then next would
Yep.
be a burnover, right? Or when the fire overcomes somebody, or your
Tree felling.
tree felling is
Tree
next,
fe-
really.
Tree felling.
And that's from
We
the
do
Sawyers, or just the fire blowing stuff over, or trees have been burnt. Go ahead.
both, which is call it hazard trees.
Got
Let's
it.
just say hazard trees, because there's a lot of variables there. There's the Sawyer potentially cutting into, but if we break it down into this hazard tree arena, we focus a lot on tree felling incidents when somebody's cutting a tree. And you have to remember here is these guys are not they are not loggers,
Right.
meaning they are not cutting green trees. They are cutting dead, burning trees with overhead hazard. So it's a super dangerous, like, and they're not doing it continuously. It's one tree here. You could go months without actually cutting a tree, and then you step into a large Douglas fir that's dropping branches and it's cat faced and hanging on by a thread, but it's pointing at your crew, it's pointing at the line. We can't effectively move through this piece of line without this hazard being removed. Now we need to put now you need to put a sawyer under that thing, or you need to determine that you can't. That's the other side of it. It's okay to say no. Be clear about that. But a lot of the times we're going to come in and try and mitigate these hazards, right? And so tree felling is this unique thing where you've got to be able to, in tree felling, in my opinion, you've got to know your routine and you've got to stick to the routine no matter what's going on. And that's what we teach here. We're very routine driven. So this is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, whatever. These are the steps. And as I watch you, I know you're hitting your steps, right? And we teach the same routine to everybody. So it's about repetition. But tree felling is really one of those things where, I can't think of a year that I've ever been in fire that there hasn't been either a major tree strike injury or a fatality.
Yeah, I remember reading about one just a few months ago, someplace I can't remember, but it was yeah, a tree. When you talk about, I guess, my assumption about hotshot guys, especially the temporary guys, that or the temporary people are coming in. A lot of mountain athletes in the off season, skiers. Maybe they have other mountain professional jobs, patrol or something, or ski instructors, and they just like to stay in the mountains. I think it is intriguing. I know I saw that in with my work and the type of fitness that we do. We would attract a lot of former college athletes because they just were used to that type of level of programming and training. Um, am I missing anything there in terms of, you're not getting probably too many computer geeks showing up, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, so I call it the land of misfit toys for sure, because there's always seems like there's one or two folks that show up a year that you kind of it's they don't fit the mold.
Got it.
They're not a ski patroller, they're not a rock climber, they're not a backcountry skier, they're not an avid backcountry hunter. They're not they're like It's like, what are you doing here, man? Like, you're a coffee barista. And it's like some of those folks have been super successful. They're like, hey man, I realized that job sucked and I was capable of more. And then there's also been the folks you're like, hey man, you should probably go back to
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. But yeah, I'd say predominantly we attract locally here. We attract more of the avid outdoorsmen is the best way I would explain them. So either it's through backcountry skiing or action sports, if you will, and or one of our fastest dudes ever on the hill, Byron Treese, former assistant superintendent here, chucker hunter. He went and hunt
Wow.
chucker, and that's what he did. And I don't know much about chucker hunting, but you
Nothing.
walk a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
you
yeah.
walk up to where the chucker are, and then you scare them, and then they fly downhill, and then you walk down to where they are down there, and you scare them, and then they go back uphill. So and it's just like those kind of folks. They're just a little bird, a little upland game bird. But anywho, we tend to attract those type of people that want to be outside, people that want to be outdoors. Some sort of adrenaline comes from it, some sort of push comes from it, some sort of challenge, right? Our most successful people are the folks that are really looking for the next challenge.
Got it. When you're out there in it on the line, it's night or it's dark or it's burning hot. It's fun, isn't it?
It is. I mean, there's a
Describe
reason
that.
why I'm still here.
It's
Yeah, there's a
fun.
reason why I'm still here, right? It's fun. It's shared suffering, right? It's these dynamic environments, and I think as an outdoorsman myself, you get you really learn to enjoy or crave even the environment that you're in. This raw nature. this raw power that you're watching unfold. Fire is the only, outside of flooding maybe, the only natural disaster that we think we can control. So there's that element of like, we're going to go in and we're going to try, and here's this challenge, here's this problem. Aaron Humphrey, former superintendent, El Dorado Hotshots, had one of the best statements I've ever heard is, we're professional problem solvers. And then you take that problem and you put it into the outdoors, right? And then you get all of the environments. You get the Klamath River running through the Klamath Mountains at sunset when you have a running crown fire up to the ridge. It's just like, you can't even, I don't know, you can't fathom, like, you're just there for that moment. And it's like a minute, 2 minutes, maybe. You get to see all those colors and all those things together.
What
and
does
then
it
it's
sound
dark.
like when the fire's roaring? What does it sound like? Is it a roar? What is it like?
Yeah, it's, folks always say, oh, it sounds like a freight train. And I was just talking about this last year. We were on the line fire down in Southern California on the San Bernardino, and fire made a run, and we were scouting a ridge line outside of Big Bear, California. And, I kind of was listening to the radio traffic and listening to some stuff, and grabbed one of the leads, and I said, hey, we gotta go look at this. Like, I think it's further than they think.
Just because you could hear it through the radio traffic. Yeah.
So the radio traffic, I was like, okay. And then we start driving down this road, and I park the truck, and I tell her to stay in the truck. I say, hey, just stay here for a moment. I'm gonna go walk down this thing real quick. And as I'm walking, it's a low rumble, right? It's just this low, consistent rumble, and I've heard it a lot, right? And I'm like, that's the fire. That is the fire. And then I'm standing on this rock, and I can see like the way that the air is moving, right? I just stick my hand up and I can feel the heat, but I can't feel it where I am because the heat's rising, but I stick my hand up and now I can feel the heat.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, we got to back out of here. And we need to go get everybody because this thing's about to slam this ridge. And aircraft couldn't see it, that kind of stuff. And it was a low rumble. And I could see maybe how folks say like the freight train, but I think when you say freight train, people think like they hear a horn or something, but it's just that low grind of the wheels going.
Tell me about the heat. I mean, because it's summer, but when you're close to it, it's hot.
It's
right?
hot. Yeah.
I mean, like hot.
And you can feel, yeah, and you can just feel it, because like this is also like when this story I'm sharing is, it's also we're about to go off shift, right? But there's like something's telling me, hey, we probably shouldn't. Something's about to happen, and it's a lot of it is just me listening to my radios, listening to these folks talk, we knew something blew out, right? We knew something was moving, but everybody's kind of every radio update was putting this fire a section further. So a section, right, on a map is 1 square mile. And I'm like counting the sections that they're saying. I was like, man, that's like 2 or 3 miles from when this thing blew out. Mm-hmm. If that's where we think it is. And I was like, and we were seeing, I was like, hey, this has alignment. If it's in this section, nothing's stopping it to here. Like nobody's doing anything to stop it. We can't even see it. So like, so it's like, so that's why we went and looked, because we were like, hey, if it is where they say it is, then it's probably already here, right? And that's just through experience with fire behavior of saying, hey, like if this is this and these things are in place, then it's probably actually further than what they're saying, because everybody's guessing at that point. Nobody's really there looking at it, because why would you be? It's ripping, we were in a good place. When we went and looked, we weren't in some sort of jeopardy. We had good egress. We had a good way out. It only took us from the moment when I walked down the road back to the truck, this was about 3 minutes, and when we were back out over where we were way out of the way, then relaying the information back, like, hey man, called the Division Romeo at that time, said, hey man, we got a problem. This thing's further than we think it is. It is going to hit this ridge, but when it hits the ridge, it'll slow down. We got time. It's going to be night. But anyways, yeah, it just like what really like kind of told me it was closer was just because I could see the ash, right? And you could see the air moving. And I just put my hand up and I was like, yeah, there it is. Like it's not that far away. And it was just a low rumble that reminds me of, I live in a small town where trains come through. And it just reminded me of the sound of the wheels rolling against the tracks. Not so much like a horn blowing or, the engine itself, just the grind of the wheels. And it's just a low, consistent rumble.
Back in my Coast Guard days, I went to this Washington State, a Washington State Fire Training Center, and they actually had a nautical element to it, and they put us in like this make believe um, engine room on a ship or whatever, and we also had to put out some fires in just like pallets burning, and it was amazing how hot it was, and we wore these masks, and they had like little metal clips, and all of us came out, we had burn marks for these metal, it was so hot, right? um, uh, I assume that I've just read about how hot some of these fires can get, you know, um, you know, uh, just from California the last couple of years, that all the aluminum wheels on vehicles were melted. Do you when with your work, do you feel that intense heat like that?
If it's that hot and that intense, we don't have the proper PPE to be in that
You'll back out
situation.
of there. You don't have to get
We'll
that
back
close to it,
out.
right? Yeah,
Yeah. So, especially as a hotshot crew, it doesn't mean that you might not have a moment where you get a little flare up
yeah,
and you kind of just bust butt for a couple, like 30 seconds, and you get past it because you
yeah.
have to. Like a good example would be like a spot fire. Something jumped the line.
Got
We've
it.
got to get on it, and you want to stop forward progress. And it's still manageable, right? But it's gonna be hot for a couple seconds or a
Got
few
it.
seconds, maybe a minute. But if it goes too long, and that's something too, like if I have an individual that's getting in there and getting after it, and they pull out and they say it's too hot, I'm not gonna tell them to go back.
Right,
I'm
right,
gonna
right.
say okay. I'm gonna say okay, we'll go wider.
Have you ever had
So
in your experience, a situation where you've just been running for your life to get out of the way of a fire, or had a close call?
no, nothing that dramatic. Where like we've pulled out a bunch, and we've also been by definition under my supervision, and I take full ownership of this. We have been entrapped, but not like a fire shelter situation. Just hey, we can't make it out. We're up this road. It was actually relatively local. It was on the Dixie Fire in 2020,
Right.
and we were up. A few crews were working below us, and they were punching some line up, and then we went up, took a bump on them, and tried to anchor and come back at them, while a firing operation was going on with a drone above us, and something rolled out, got below the road we drove in. I drove down, said, "Hey, we can't get out. We're stuck." And it was intense fire. It was once that spot fire established, it ran back uphill, active crown fire, and just said, "Hey, we got to stay put, and we're going to be here for a while." Right. And that was just the message being relayed to everybody, my division group supervisor and the resources around us. And one of my good buddies on a different hotshot crew, he was watching the other side saying, "Hey, when it cools off, I'll let you know. And we'll try and get everybody to move out of there." Because it wasn't just us. And this is one of those times where I fully take ownership and say, hey, I probably stepped outside of basic strategies and tactics, and we tried to go be aggressive on something, and I took people with me outside of my crew. I took some engines, I took some dozers, and I was like, man, that was too aggressive. That was too aggressive. And there's a difference between being aggressive solely as your crew and then being aggressive with other resources you really don't know.
Got it.
And that situation was where I stepped back and said, hey, like we had an opportunity to get some success, but I lost track of what was actually happening around me. And that was a lesson learned for me of like, hey, like you've really, because what was I doing? I was working with the crew. I was not doing my job of making sure that the egress was protected and that the plan was still valid, right? I was too busy probably micromanaging some firing things that we were doing,
Right.
when I should have just trusted. When I had great people, I had great leadership, I should have just let them do their thing, and I should have been paying more attention to what was going on below us, right? And that was a lesson learned. But at that same time, I knew where we were was good. I said, because we wouldn't have gone up there in the first place if it wasn't good, right? And so, and that's my, I guess, defense on it. It was just a lesson learned to me that I lost track of the things going around me. And that fire was easy to lose track of what was going on because it was so large and there was so much going on, and there wasn't a day that a community wasn't threatened. That And we, being a local hotshot crew and familiar with the area, we tended to find ourselves in the front, in the action,
Yeah, yeah.
where it was. And then you can, and I'm sure you get what I'm saying here, you can only play the game in front and probability, the game of probability of being in front before something happens.
Yeah, it's
You can,
exposure. The longer your exposure, you just, yeah, no matter how good you are. In
yeah,
terms of like equipment, I saw recently where Yeti purchased Mystery Ranch, and I saw a headline after that said, maybe they'll be closing Mystery Ranch or something. And I know that Mystery Ranch has to be the dominant provider of the packs. I don't know anybody else who makes a Wildland Fire Pack. Is there another company that
yeah.
makes them?
Yeah, there's a few companies out there. Mystery Ranch is definitely, their involvement in the wildland fire community is really, I think, what kind of staples them with us, because they really support the community.
Got
And
it.
I think a lot of wildland fire companies do a great job of supporting and maybe have some grassroots kind of development, like former firefighters is what I'm getting at here,
Right, right, right.
develop the company. But there's a few other pack companies out there. Kind of one of the first ones was like True North that I can remember, or Eagle Gear, Nar Gear. There's a few other pack companies out there as well. But yeah, Mystery Ranch or Thielsen is another one. We have totally made this transition to Mystery Ranch packs here, and
Is that up to the individual firefighter, or do you guys provide them, or?
we provide them. But if
Yeah,
folks like, if they have a desired pack
a
that they
kit
want
they
to
run with.
use, yeah, it's like, go for it, man. Like,
What?
you're gonna beat the crap out of it. So here's our gear,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
wanna,
Boots. It seems, and I could be wrong, but it seems that recently there's been more options for boots. I know white's dominated for a while, but it just seems like there's more and more options. Are white still dominating, or I imagine boots are the most important piece of gear for guys?
yeah, you got to take care of your feet, right?
Yeah,
So, there's a few boot companies out there. The only thing that I'd say with boots is just know what your foot is. Understand, go get fitted, those kind of things, so that, because if your feet are uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable, type of deal. I'm super guilty of sticking with the boot company that ultimately kind of destroyed my feet with a narrow toe box.
mm,
And eventually I was stubborn, and up until last year I finally made a transition and got a different boot, and finally got a wider toe box. But yeah, you get these leather boot companies. You pay for what you get, is what I'll say there. And
right.
there's a
You're
reason
talking
why
five
there's
hundred
six.
bucks a pair of boots, right? Custom
Yep.
fit and everything. Yeah,
Yep. So, and I think there's some good companies out there. A lot of the producers seem to come out of Spokane, Washington, for
yep,
boots.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's kind of curious.
there's
I know Nick's is there. I think White's is there, and there's some others too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So there's and even a few companies that have started more recently seem to have some sort of roots founded, they're Whites or Nicks, and then they just kind of broke away to make their own stuff.
You had mentioned just a little bit earlier that there was like a drone that was doing some fireworks stuff for you. I got, I look at the International Journal of Wildland Fire. I'm just trying to get, some idea of how, if there's been any strategic or technological advances for fighting these wildland fires. Has there been anything that's come on recently that's you're excited about?
I think the imagery that we're starting to get our hands on, a lot of these are intel ships. There's one flying, there's one housed out of, I believe it's Orange County. These intel ships that are kind of flying around, they've got they're flying at like 30,000 feet. And, I don't know the full details on what these things are, or the capabilities, but they're flying with infrared or
Got
some
it.
sort of imagery. And they're flying, they're giving live intel updates from a person in the aircraft. I would say that's probably one of the best tools that's newer. And these things have been around. It's just like it's being maybe more widely used or shared, this information. But one of the best ones, I believe, is housed out of Orange County. I'm sure there's videos all over the internet right now of that ship flying around. Just good live updates that go directly to the incident command teams, and can share that data. I'd say really it's imagery is what is, that live fire data tracking, because we're making a lot of decisions, I believe, based on, and I don't think it's wrong, but based on assumptions
Got
of
it.
what we think, and what, we're trying to base one of our fire orders and watchouts, right, is base all actions on current and expected fire behavior. So you can make a guess. But if you can't actually see, like, you take the Klamath Mountains up here, get highly, like, big inversions, right? It rips in the day, and then that smoke sets in, and you can't see anything.
Yeah.
You can't get to a high point and look and see the fire. You can't fly aircraft. You can't get this update. You're just kind of stuck there in this fog, if you will. And you finally, the only way you get intel is you just go walk it. And in some places you just can't walk into in those mountains, not with fire below you. So, but the ability of some of these cameras now, I'd say I'm excited to see where that goes, and see, more importantly, is how they're able to get that type of information to an operator like myself. Like, there's decision makers in camp, and there's operations and incident commanders and stuff, and those folks have a job and a responsibility, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, if I could get that information as a superintendent, as somebody that's actually directing my resource, at least somewhat relevant time frame, I can potentially make better decisions on the ground. So this imagery stuff, I'm sure we'll see more and more imagery stuff come up, and the use of that stuff is whatever technology we can kind of sneak out of the military to help us with that. I think we'll go a long ways.
With the could just be the news. We get more news now, but it certainly seems like there's more and more of these fires. And has there been any significant change or improvement in terms of firefighting strategy or methodology or tactics that have come along these last few years with just all the reps you guys are getting? Anything that you've noticed, or perhaps that you've changed in your own tactics?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword here. I think a couple things have happened. And I might be going down the wrong hole here, and by all means stop me. But I think social media has had a relatively negative impact in aggressive firefighting. There's a time and a place when life is threatened that we need individuals to take risk. There's also the ability to slap a camera on a helmet or slap a camera on a truck and take unnecessary risk when you're not going to be successful, right? And when I say successful, as in, like, we're trying to do perimeter control and we're doing a frontal assault on something that's not actually affecting life or property, but we're putting a firefighter at risk that's unanchored because it's got good footage, right? Because it looks cool. And that's been like one of my things that I really harp on this crew is like, hey, why you don't get the cool photos of the fire on our crew is because your phone shouldn't be out. Your camera shouldn't be out in that situation. You should be focused on the job, and you should be making sure that if you're pulling your camera out to take pictures and video, right? I like taking pictures. Don't get me wrong. I love the imagery that we can get, like some of the best photos in the world. But in that dynamic situation, you should be making decisions, not taking video. And that's something to be concerned about, I think, is that, hey, we've got this kind of imagery thing, or this image built into our heads now that we're not fighting fire unless there's a cool photo attached to it. And that's just something, and that's very much an opinion. But I'd say when it comes down to change in strategies and tactics or decision making, is I think it'd be hard pressed. Now, there's going to be resources that have good experience in them, but I don't think that there's an agency in the wildland fire arena that can honestly sit there and say they don't have some sort of experience gap. They have lost experience in their profession, meaning folks have retired, and the attrition rate for federal agencies in particular, over the last 10 years, I'd say we lost our middle management. We lost our next level of decision makers, right? They went on to these metro departments, or they left the agencies completely, or left fire completely, and they took their experience with them. And there's very few folks left that have that real depth of experience, that have the ability to teach it. And what's happening is we've got huge dynamic fire situations unfolding with the wildland urban interface. And there's risk. Like, I totally commend any of these folks, like down in Ventura, Orange County, San Bernardino, any of the CAL FIRE guys that are down there, and ladies down there getting after it in LA right now, right? I totally commend them, because they're in a situation that, experience or not experience, it's dynamic, man. And it is what it is, because you're dealing with the public, you're dealing with 100-mile-an-hour winds. Like, I don't know that experience alone just keeps you safe when you, as a firefighter, have a sense of duty in that situation. You're likely going to take risk. And I want to make sure that comparison that I just gave earlier in that situation, I'm saying those two things are kind of different here. I'm saying that there's a risk and a value in life truly threatened, that these individuals have to get in and do things maybe they wouldn't do in other situations. They
Got
might
it.
have to do those things. So it's just this idea that, we're going to go hunt for the aggressive firefighting when it's unnecessary,
I got it. Got it.
right?
Do
And
you?
so,
Is there a? If I remember right, I read, or I think I had a story in the Ret about some salary increases for wildland firefighters and perhaps more permanent jobs being made. Um,
mhm.
what is? It seems to me that just the salary situation and the year-round permanent job is probably one of the biggest challenges to keeping staff and keeping experienced around. Am I missing anything else in terms of just kind of filling the positions and keeping guys around?
Yeah, I think, oh, you got me still?
Yep, I got you. Yep.
Okay. Something just happened in my headphone. I'm not sure what happened there, but apologies. It is important. It is important to see these permanent pay structures pass, because, like I was explaining earlier, and this is all in Congress right now, right? We get into March here, and the pay reform, this supplemental pay increase that federal employees are working under right now, is potentially going to go away. And I think I can say honestly, if it does go away, there's no way the federal agencies aren't going to see a huge attrition, right? Because this pay reform, or this supplemental pay, keeps getting bumped every continuing resolution. And now it's become something that people have normalized in their financial accounts, right? They've gotten used to this. And I would say, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, they've learned to expect it, to expect this pay, but it's temporary. And if we don't see the permanent pay reform fixed and an appropriate funding bill passed by Congress to support that, then there's going to be a big problem in the federal fire agencies with attrition. I don't think that that's going too far out on a limb to say that. You've got people like me that are, I'm invested. I'm going to stick around, right? I also realize that this supplemental pay might go away. So I'm planning for that. And that's my best advice to people is, hey, you ought to be planning for what that pay is. But that's the first hurdle here. We need to see this pay reform get permanent, so that we can start to put our emphasis and effort onto some other things for a little bit, and make sure that our experience is being spread. But there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, spending a lot of time trying to make sure that this pay reform goes through. So that's a big deal.
In terms of careers, I mean, high divorce rate amongst wildland firefighters, a lot of drinking, PTSD. Any of those issues common that might be you might see in some other tactical professions?
I'd say so. I don't have data to give you on those things. I can only share my own story. And that is, I'm married. I have a daughter, and it definitely affects them. It definitely affects our relationship. My wife is strong. My daughter is strong. And my time, what I had to learn as a young adult, and to be, so through my positions on this crew, right, is I had to learn that they're important, and they are the most important thing to me. While I love my job and I love everything about this place that I work, and this crew and this culture and the people that work for me and the people that I worked for, they're very much so my family. People that sit in this office with me, the people that sit across the hall from me, they're very much so my family. But they're not my blood, right? But they are my family. my time, what I used to think was time management was, hey, I've earned this right to go and do this bad habit. Mine was alcohol consumption, right? So I said, hey, I just busted my ass. Now I'm going to get home. It's day 17 being gone. I'm going to get home. And instead of me going home to my family, I went to the bar with the crew. And that was the biggest life lesson that my wife, love her to death, man. She's the one that said, hey, dude, you're either going to hang out with us or you're going to hang out with them. And if you're going to hang out with them, we'll see you later. And I was like, oh, wow, that's real. She says, I'm holding it down here. I'm holding it down. I'm making sure the bills are paid. I'm making sure that our daughter's being raised. I'm making sure she's going to school. I'm making sure she's involved in sports. I'm getting her here. I'm getting her there. I'm calling people to say happy birthday on your behalf, right? Like, that realization to me took me way too long to get to that realization. And that's the message I want to share. It's what it came down to me, and how I boiled it down was, how am I managing my time? Because people will say, hey, this job takes your time and you don't have anything time to do anything else. And I agree to an extent, but where I disagree is the time management when people are at home. What was the biggest problem that I had is I didn't manage my time at home. When I was home, I prioritized my own needs, which is important to take care of yourself, right? But the needs that I was prioritizing were bad coping mechanism from stress and trauma that I endured through an assignment or a year, right? And so what did I do? I used a bad coping mechanism in alcohol, and I mismanaged my time at home, which created more stress and more problems. And it wasn't until 2019 when I said, I'm going to stop drinking. That's what is my job is not the problem. My family is not the problem. My alcohol consumption is my problem. That's my problem, right? Because I'm coming home from a fire assignment and I'm wasting my time consuming alcohol, because that dopamine hit, right, from that 2 to 3 hours of that buzz, that feel good moment is leading to wasted time the next day, hungover and unable to accomplish the day-to-day task as a father and a husband that shouldn't be in question. There shouldn't have to be allotted time. It should just be happening, right? So that's my 2 cents on it. That's kind of my story, is like, hey, it came down, and that's what I share with my crew. I share that story with my crew. Yeah. I say, hey, this is the deal, man. Like, it's real. That feeling you have is real. That stress you feel, yep, that's real too. And that coping mechanism that you're using that you know is not right, that's real. And how much do you value that? And how much do you value your time? Because my job became a lot easier the day that I stopped drinking and managed my time with my family. I'm gone for 18 straight days. When I come home, I still am available to my crew and my people, right? They can call me if they need something. I still work with 25-year-old dudes and females that are going to go do their thing. Right. So I just share and say, hey, man, I was there. Like, I know I was 25. I did that. I got home from an assignment and couldn't wait to leave these doors and go straight to the shower and to the bar. Right. So for numerous reasons, right? But anyways, like, that time management that's what I've kind of told people. I'm like, hey, it's your time management. There's still time away from family, and there's still things with this job that affect other people. But for me, it wasn't the job that was the problem. It was how I was coping with the stress and trauma from the job that was wasting my time.
Got it.
I hope that makes sense.
Right. Any misconceptions that I mean, there aren't that many movies that kind of feature wildland firefighters I can think of. I guess I can think of three or four for sure. Any misconceptions that you think the public might have about wildland firefighters based on the media, social media, or
Ah,
bigger media?
you know, I think I think it's getting pretty good. I think ultimately, and I think there's always a misconception whenever Hollywood gets a hold of anything,
Yeah,
that it's just always big flames and heroic efforts, you know. While those moments exist and those things happen, a lot of our job, fire is like there's dynamic situations in the first 24 to 48 hours of an incident when it's starting.
yeah,
And we can use these fires in LA where there's a lot of moving pieces and it's happening quick, especially with like high velocity winds. Things are moving quick. But what I always kind of like to pass on, and maybe not so much to the public, but to firefighters, is hey, there is time to make decisions. You have time. You have time to step back and look at the scene, right? I think if I was to give for the firefighters, that's what I would give, right? You have time to step back and make a sound decision with your people, right? Use your people, use your team, come to a conclusion, make a decision that's appropriate for the moment. Be okay changing your mind, right? For the public, I'd say everybody, and particularly Wildland Fire and the federal agencies, everybody thinks that these guys are pulling home like six figures. And it's like, no, they're not. They're not. They're not pulling home six figures. They're a first year firefighter on our crew, maybe $50,000 to $60,000 on a busy year.
and
You
that's
know,
because of the overtime, right?
yep, and that's
Yep.
because of the overtime. So, I'd say like, hey, oh, you're a firefighter, life must be good. I'm like, well, kind of. Like, I like my job, I really enjoy it, but I'm not here to get rich.
Right.
Basically, is what the statement is. You know, um, I think I think that would be the biggest misconception, is that like these folks like um and another misconception I think would be that there's some sort of enjoyment in destruction for overtime money. And it's like, no, we enjoy the environment and the challenge to solve that problem and to serve really the American people, right? That's what we enjoy. We do not enjoy watching a family's home burn.
Right.
There's no enjoyment in that. There's no enjoyment in watching somebody suffer that just lost everything. There's no enjoyment in that. But there is a sense of duty and pride to be the individual there to pick up the pieces on somebody's worst day, right? So there's not this like, oh, I hope a fire starts so I can go get money. No, we want to go challenge ourselves and provide a service to the American people, but we don't want to see anybody suffer. We don't want to see anybody lose anything.
Got it.
So I'd say that would.
I is there a hot shot crew or a state fire department or a state wildland crew or something in your world that is really seen as setting the standard?
I can think of a few crews nationally, IHC crews.
What are, can you name
That
them?
Yeah, and this is my opinion,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In my view, we have our favorites, right? We have our folks that and a lot of that is just relationships built on certain incidents and through leadership transitions. There's just been some a conduit between these crews through leadership transitions over the years.
So that means you'll have like a guy go from one crew to another or something like that, and stuff
Yeah,
goes around.
something like that. And or you just built some sort of relationship through an incident
Got it.
with them, and you kind of grew up with them through those incidents, right? They're
I
on
see
that
it.
crew, I'm on this crew, but you're always there
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
other,
I understand.
right? I personally really like to look and observe all hotshot crews, because I believe all hotshot crews provide me some sort of tangible thing to look at and say, I could do this better, and I can change this and meet this, or I like the way they do this, but I'm going to change it this way or whatever. But crews in particularly, we really enjoy working with Eldorado Hotshots. We really enjoy working with those guys. Mendocino Hotshots, really like working with those guys. I can name every hotshot crew in North Ops and say we really like working with these guys, because guess what? We work with them every year,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And they're out there. So there's other regions and there's other crews in other regions. But we spend so much time with our North Ops crews, and if I took it to a region, I would say I really believe that our North Ops crews have found a way to work really well with each other, right? In dynamic situations. But those are two of them. There's Helena Hot Shots in Montana. Really love working with those folks. You get Roosevelt in Colorado. You get Vail in Lakeview and Eniat in Washington. And I'm at this point I'm throwing multiple crew names out because I believe they all have something to offer us.
Yeah.
Right? They all have something that we can get together. Now, each region has a different risk management strategy
Got it.
and an acceptance of risk and what they consider an acceptance of risk, right? So that's just kind of where I'll hang that one, because you don't want to leave anybody out and you don't want to call anybody out. Not in this business. If you're going to call somebody out or have some sort of thing to say to them, you don't do it in a platform. You do it face to face, right? Kind of deal. But there's just what I really want to message here is that each region has a strength of what they do, and that when I leave here and go to a different region, I need to be aware of what my strengths and weaknesses are and understand that these are the locals. These are the folks that are going to help me determine strategies and tactics.
Got it.
Because there's players and cards that I'm unaware of as an outside resource or an outer region resource. That just is what it is. And we can say there's standards and there's things that should happen, but the reality is the complexities of fire come through human communication, right? And how we deliver strategies and tactics. So anyways, I fired off a few crews there. We love and respect them all, and we really enjoy working with any hotshot crew, any Type 2 crew, any engine. Our job and what I really value as Diamond Mountain is when we show up, we're known for blue collar work ethic, right? But what I also really hope we're known for is that when we come in, we're going to provide our opinion and our thought process, but ultimately we want to be a part of the team.
Got it.
Because we can't do it by ourselves, and nobody can.
Let's just go through some rapid fire questions. I think you had mentioned earlier on that fire where I think Diamondback fire. I think where you had your crew kind of got entrapped and you had to hold it. Is that your most dangerous professional mistake, or have you made another one that stands out in your mind?
So that's my worst decision, if you will, in group management. The most dangerous mistake I made individually was in tree felling. Being overly aggressive on a couple trees where I'm lucky I'm fast, basically, and I was able to move out of the way of something.
So you were the Sawyer and you got out of the way before you got smashed by the trees.
Yep.
Got it.
I took on a complex tree that I wasn't ready for.
Got it.
So, and that was younger in my life, right? So,
the most surprising thing you've learned about human nature through your work? Anybody really surprised you, or in general or individually?
If you can deliver clear leadership and intent, it's amazing how hard these people work for me. It is amazing what they will put themselves through to be a part of this crew. It's just every year I have high expectations and high standards, but I hope to never lose my gratitude and respect to these individuals for the effort that they give to the crew, but I really believe that they also give to me. The sacrifices that they make to themselves physically, mentally, and to their families to support a vision that I may be creating or pushing. And that's something that I'm just super grateful for, because I can't I can come up with all the strategies and tactics in the world, but if my folks don't believe in my leadership and they don't believe in what we're going to go do, and I don't have them with me, my strongest attribute is my crew and my ability to lead my crew, because
This
I
is it.
can take the horsepower in.
Yeah, sorry, I've got an interesting question for you then. As have you personally not worked as hard for a leader you didn't like?
No,
So
no, because you still have your peers.
right,
Me personally, maybe the leader wasn't my favorite, but the saw partner was still there pushing.
got it.
The saw partner was still there. My buggy buddy, right? My buddy, my self-appointed or my crew-appointed best friend, was still suffering and pushing. And regardless of how I felt about a leader, but Rob, I've got a unique situation where I'm one of the very few and blessed, if you will, that's had a lot of strong leaders.
Yeah.
I've had I've seen bad leadership, but my direct supervision and leadership has been strong. So I'm very lucky, and that's not fluff, man. That's real. I've just been one of those folks that's managed to find the right home year after year.
Is there a piece of your kit that has been in your pack for all 8 years? Something that, just hasn't been replaced or that you depend on that is maybe unique to you, or something that maybe a new piece of gear has come out, but you stuck with the old, like your favorite piece of gear?
My hand tool, just that's you once you get into this, at least for Diamond, you get into your leadership role, you get the Bosley, and it's kind of a sign of like,
You get
I'm in a leadership role.
You get a what?
It's
What
it's
is
a
it?
tool. It's a tool called a Bosley.
A Bosley?
It's basically a folding shovel.
Okay.
And it's and it's you take a shovel and you cut the tip off, and it has a flat edge, so you can dig and you can still scoop. But like when that tool was handed to me, I was like, all right, I am a leader now.
So only the suit carries the Bosley, huh?
No, the leaders, there's the squad leaders, leads, and assistants all carry it.
Got it.
But it was that first sign of moving, and it's fun watching our firefighter trainees when they'll do their training assignment, and guess what they grab? They grab their Bosley, and sometimes I'll hand my tool to somebody and say, "Yeah, you feel that? It feels good, huh?"
Great.
But I carry very limited stuff with me in my pack because ounces equal pounds, man.
Right. Yeah.
So,
what's the best part of the job?
Right now, man, it's the opportunity to work with younger firefighters and develop them and share my own experiences. And more recently is to step back from a superintendent role and observe and realize that just because they're maybe a first year or a third year crew member, they can still teach me something. One of the best things that I've been able to change about myself, and I believe in this, is my a better ability to listen to what these folks are saying and be okay going and getting feedback from a rookie, the rookie check. Like, hey man, did this make sense? When I briefed on this today, did it make sense to you? Do you know what you're doing? And them have the comfort to tell me, you know what, man, actually I don't. Or, hey man, like, you said this and that was fairly aggressive or super opinionated, and me step out of I'm the leader and listen to what they're saying so that I can develop and take this mind frame of, I'm 20 years in, but I'm still learning how to be a leader every day. I'm still learning to be a leader. So,
what's the worst part of the job?
The worst part is leaving the family. Absolutely. Leaving the family home. And I'd say even the unique situation right now where you have a skill set, like I have a skill set of organizational control in dynamic situations in large fire.
Mhm.
And to see large fires going on in Southern California, but also be coaching my daughter's basketball team and sit there in the middle and try and decide, what road do you pick?
Yeah.
Do you take your skill set and go help down here? Or do you stay here and help develop a relationship with your daughter and your family and also your community, right? Because I live in a town of like 1,500, maybe 2,000 people. Not everybody has my skill set in team management, and not that I'm a basketball expert, but I have an ability to teach, and I know that. So it's like I'm right here. Basketball season for our league just kicked off.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to build the fundamentals in a bunch of new girls. And I'm like, oh no, do I go fight fire and take this skill set? Or am I, and you can feel selfish. You pick either one, you feel selfish.
Yeah, right.
So that's a unique thing. And luckily my wife was willing and able to sit down with me last night, and we chatted about that. And that's my best advice. It's like, hey, it's not an easy conversation because you're talking about leaving. Right? And then you know what my wife wants me to do? She wants me to stay home. So, but she gets it.
What's the worst job you can imagine?
Outside of fire?
Anything. Yeah, outside of fire.
Anything? Oh man, if I had to, boy, I'm an operator. If I can't get my hands dirty, I'd say anything that doesn't allow me to get in and be out in the field is gonna not fit my lifestyle.
Got it.
So I want to be outside. So I wouldn't want to call out any specific profession because I don't know enough about any of them. I know this job. When I was 8 years old, I said I would be a hotshot.
Wow.
So
I guess a dream job other than hotshot.
I have a responsibility, I'd say, to make sure I build a transition plan for this crew for me to leave here and take my experience and expertise to the next levels and take that into the state offices and national offices, and deliver from an operator at least the needs as I see it, and help push the needs of my employees up.
Best career advice you've ever received. The best piece of career advice you ever received.
The crew will always be here. So you can move on.
Oh.
You can move on.
Got it.
And you don't have to solely have your identity be this crew. You can move on, and the crew will be okay. It will be okay.
Worst piece of career advice.
Man. I read that question when you sent it to me, and I really kept kind of dwelling on it and listening and thinking about it. And worst advice, I've had a lot of good advice, but worst advice I'd say was more of like a mantra was the crew comes first. The crew comes first, and it's like, okay, and I think it was more that I misunderstood what was being said, right? Like the crew comes first, like, hey, when you need to make sure that the crew is ready to roll, you need to make sure that you're committed and available to go on fire assignment with the crew, because we need these standards, we need these qualifications. You have to commit to this. It's a commitment thing, right? But what I misinterpreted about it was, I can't put the crew first if I haven't taken care of my house, right? Like Jordan Peterson says, you have to have the house in order to be a successful crew member, or a successful member of this crew. The crew comes first is a mentality of like, I'm here and I'm committed, but you have to have your house in order.
Got it. Biggest professional or career regret.
I think biggest regrets are just, early on in leadership, thinking that the yelling the raising of a voice, or the kind of the aggressive demeanor of like, shut up and dig, or hey, you're like, just trying to lead through words, right? And being in a poor delivery in that, of kind of like, just shut up and do it type of attitude, where I realized through growth and time spent in these positions that nobody, like, while maybe I responded well as a young hotshot to somebody yelling at me and telling me, kind of like, to be honest, kind of telling me I was dumb, right? Or that I didn't have it, or that I wasn't doing my part. Even though I knew I was pushing myself and I knew I was given what I had, I kind of took that same mentality to people and said, hey, you're not like me, so you must not be doing it right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, you're not doing it exactly the way I do it. You're not running this pace preseason. You're not hiking the way I'm hiking. You're not doing these things, so you must be doing it wrong, because it's not like I do it, So that was a huge growth thing.
One thing you've believed for a long time to be true, but now know is false.
So we've, with the pay reform stuff, right? We heard a lot of kind of, I almost even say, slanderous comments to people within the agencies, as though they don't care. And it's through my chairman role on a national committee, I can tell you, I sit in this office with these people on whether it's video calls or face-to-face meetings, and hear these people and the struggles that they're going through to support our firefighters, and the battles that they're ensuing to make sure that our employees have the best access to mental health, the best access and opportunity for pay increases. And then to hear people, and even myself at times, say, well, the agency isn't doing this, and then go and meet the people in the agency and see that, boy, these folks are working till 10 o'clock at night for free to build this position description, or to build this thing, right, to support my crew. And that was some humble pie, man, to go, oh, wow. Like, bureaucracy is a beast, right?
Yeah.
But to hear, and also at times say, oh, they don't care, was like, no, man, there ain't a person in these agencies, in my opinion, that doesn't care. They wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be pulling their hair out and turning gray if it wasn't for the efforts they're putting forward. And I just got lucky enough to get involved with those committees and be voted in to do that stuff. And then, boy, like the first year of doing that, I was just left and right. I was just like, well, that opinion wasn't right, or that thought wasn't right. Like, these people are all busting their butts. Like, yeah, maybe they're not digging line or running a tank with me, but they are here at 6 a.m. and they're not leaving till 10, trying to get these PDs pumped out so we can increase our pay rate. Like, that's, big props to those folks, and huge appreciation. And, that's my message to folks is, hey, the agencies do care. The people inside these agencies do care. So,
Advice you give to your 20-year-old self.
hey, man, put the bottle away. You don't need it. You don't need that. You're going to slow your progress down. Boy, I could only imagine. I'm faster on the hill now at nearly 40 than I was when I was 22. And I'm like, wow, what could have been, kind of deal.
How's your body weight? Do you weigh the same, or are you lighter?
Probably I'm heavier.
Yeah.
I'm heavier.
More muscle.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So that's that was, that's something like, hey, the hope of being into some unique situation, chase and tell or whatever, as a 22-year-old on a Tuesday night at a bar in South Lake Tahoe where you just sat there by yourself. Yeah, what was that for? Like, what that What'd that do besides miss a powder day at Sierra at Tahoe? Like, geez, like, just put it away, man. Like, watch the impulse, be aware.
Anything I should have asked that I didn't ask?
No, I think we hit it, man. I think we hit questions really well, and I think if I was to just pass on anything else, is just we're wildland fire. If you put it in comparison to maybe some branches of the military or anything, we're a really young profession. We really are. You know, you can really kind of go back to 1910, right? When we put an emphasis on wildland fire suppression and say, hey, we're barely over 100 years old here, and we're a young profession, and we're growing, and we're learning, and we're going through transitions. And I just ask those folks to be patient with that and understand that while we have a guiding light or a North Star of things we want to do, that opinions are going to change and plans are going to change. I like to pass on to the crew on just kind of fire assignments is like, hey, there is no perfect plan. And when somebody provides you a perfect plan, then you should be very, very aware of that. And so there is no perfect plan. We're changing our minds all the time. And we need to understand that that's okay. That's okay to change our mind. That's okay to change direction. It's okay to have an opinion change. And you need to be okay doing that.
It is really interesting because I think that wildland is such a fire, such an interesting convergence of mountain athletes and tactical athletes. Really, a really interesting combination of just really interesting tactical athletes. With the load carriage and the danger, and then the mountainous terrain, and you're talking about your hill and hiking up that, and I'm sure you've been having to do the same thing on a fire where there's no trail and it's not clear. You're humping over deadfall. I've been in some miserable situations like that, just backcountry hunting, or just getting lost, and I mean that's no for no, and oh my god, I mean just even cutting firewood in the summer where it's 15 degrees hotter in the forest than it is outside in the open. People don't realize how much you're sweating. I really admire and admire you guys and the work you do, and thank you for serving your country, and thank you for your service. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being here with us.
Absolutely, Rob. I appreciate everything you offer us in our community as well. The advice that you give us through the articles and the contributor writers that you have sought after, the leadership articles, the fitness, the exercise library, all of those things that your company provides us and your platform provides our community. I hope that folks jump on board and understand what you're providing us is a super valued resource outside of just physical fitness training, but the articles and the access to data and the mini studies and all those things, the opportunities to learn is what I'm getting at here.
Well, appreciate that, Dan. Thanks very much.
Thank you.